A war fought not with bullets, but with chilling calculations, and a breathtaking reversal played out on the back of a divorce decree. The brilliant morning sun of early June sliced through the blinds, casting sharp, unforgiving blades of light across the cold marble tiles of the living room. The silence in the three-story colonial, tucked deep in a wide, leafy cul-de-sac in Brookline, Massachusetts, was so profound you could hear the relentless tick-tock. Tick-tock. A steady, soulless beat from the grandfather clock against the wall. Evelyn Reed stood silently beside the solid oak dining table, a piece she had painstakingly chosen herself 10 years ago, driving down to a workshop in rural Vermont, selecting the grain of the wood with her own hands, and spending the last of her single life savings to furnish their first home. Today, her long, dark hair was still swept up in its customary elegant chignon, secured by the familiar white pearl clip. Her face was a mask of placid composure, but her eyes were deep, holding the quiet devastation of a marriage that had officially ended with a judge's decree exactly 5 days prior. 10 years of her youth bled dry for her husband's family. 10 years of biting her tongue, of swallowing her pride in the desperate hope of earning a measure of peace. But in the end, all Evelyn had received was a betrayal of trust, the bottomless pit of her feckless husband's debts, and the suffocating, manipulative cruelty of her mother-in-law. This house had once been the vessel of all her hopes. Now, it was just an empty shell, carrying the musty scent of arguments that never truly ended. The house was too quiet, but inside the 38-year-old woman, a silent storm was raging, a tempest of grief and stifled rage. Since the divorce is final, we'll sell the house. We'll split it down the middle. It's only fair. The voice, cold, sharp, and dripping, with the tone of an unbreakable command, belonged to Eleanor Miller, her mother-in-law. It sliced through the silence like a shard of glass. Eleanor sat enthroned on the Italian leather sofa in the center of the room, leisurely holding a cup of Earl Grey tea, a thin wisp of steam rising from it. Her gaze was as sharp as a scalpel, sweeping over Evelyn without a flicker of remorse or empathy. To the 6-2-year-old matriarch, whose life's ambition was to control every family asset, a daughter-in-law who had outlived her usefulness was a stranger, worse, an adversary attempting to lay claim to the Miller family legacy. Not far away, Kevin, the man who had once sworn on a stack of Bibles to protect Evelyn for all of his days, kept his head bowed, his eyes glued to the meaningless glow of his smartphone. His shoulders were slumped in a posture of cowardly abdication, surrendering all authority and responsibility to his mother. The full force of their cold, calculated pressure was being applied less than a week after the law had formally dissolved their bond. Evelyn froze, her hand, which had been resting on the back of the oak chair, tightened until her knuckles turned white. After 10 years of devotion, of pouring her life force into building a family from scratch, was this all anyone remembered when love had curdled into contempt? The portion of the assets that legally bore your name, the air in the living room, grew taut, ready to snap. Eleanor set her teacup down on the glass coffee table with a sharp, dry Times clack asterisk. Did you hear me? Asterisk Evelyn asterisk. Eleanor's lips curled into a smirk, her tone dripping with condescension. The judge signed off on it. You'll be moving out. And my Kevin can't stay in this cavernous house all by himself. He needs the capital to get his business back on its feet, to rebuild his career. The deed is in both your names, a marital asset. We sell it, split the proceeds 50/50. That's clean. It's fair. It's the way of the world. No one owes anyone anything. Asterisk. No one owes anyone anything. Asterisk. Evelyn took a deep breath. All of Kevin's gambling debts she had covered over the years, the times she had skipped meals and worn old clothes to pay for her sister-in-law's tuition, to cover her mother-in-law's medical bills, all of it had just been turned to ash by a woman who simply wanted to cash out. Kevin finally cleared his throat, mumbling, his eyes still refusing to meet his ex-wife's gaze. Ev, Mom's right. It makes sense. Let's just sell it, clear the debts. No reason to drag this out. A wave of revulsion rose in Evelyn's throat, bitter and choking. She released her grip on the chair, smoothed the front of her dress, and walked calmly to stand directly before them. So, you and Kevin want to sell this house immediately? Evelyn asked again, her voice devoid of even a tremor. And Kevin, you also believe a 50/50 split is the fairest outcome for me? Well, what else would it be? Before Kevin could answer, a shrill voice descended from the staircase. Jessica, Kevin's 4-year-old sister, sauntered into the living room, a half-eaten apple in her hand. Her sly eyes glinted with a familiar, predatory cunning. Actually, Mom, you're being too generous saying that, she chimed in. I did a quick Zillow search. Property values in this neighborhood have skyrocketed this year. It's a corner lot. Solid construction. Even a quick sale. We're looking at $1.2 million easy. Mom, we pocket $600,000. Sweet. That's more than enough for Kevin to start over. $1.2 million. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. Her hand subtly clenched the fabric of her dress. $1.2 million for this house. She remembered it clearly. In 2016, when she had drained her savings to buy this dilapidated property and rebuild it, its value was barely over $500,000. Even with market inflation, the property as it stood couldn't have jumped to $1.2 million with the certainty Jessica projected. Unless, a chilling memory flashed through her mind. The phone call, at 1 p.m. the night before. The sound of rain drumming against the window pane had mixed with the hurried, low voice of Mr. Peterson, their old neighbor, a retired city planner. Evelyn, that extra parcel, the overgrown, marshy plot behind your house, the city just quietly finalized the rezoning plans. They're putting a new commercial corridor through there. Your useless backlot is about to become prime double-frontage commercial real estate. Listen to me, keep your mouth shut. The developers are already sniffing around like bloodhounds. Evelyn blinked, her gaze sweeping over the three faces before her, their greed now naked and undisguised. Eleanor was rubbing her hands together in satisfaction. Kevin swallowed hard, his eyes lighting up with avarice at the mention of $600,000. Jessica was preening, as if she had just won the lottery. They were gleefully calculating their share of the $1.2 million from the house on the front lot, and not a single one of them remembered, or even cared, that the marshy, overgrown plot out back, the one Eleanor had for a decade, derided as bad luck land, and a worthless swamp, was in fact titled on a separate deed, a piece of private property, in the name of one person, Evelyn Reed. A thin, cold smile, sharp as a razor's edge, touched the corners of the 8-year-old woman's lips. The pearl clip in her hair seemed to catch the morning light and shine even brighter. All right, Evelyn nodded, her voice chillingly calm. If you've all done the math and decided that $1.2 million is a fair price, let's go to the title company next week and sign the closing documents. The sound of packing tape being ripped from its dispenser echoed through the quiet bedroom, a sharp, tearing sound. Evelyn methodically pressed the tape along the edge of a cardboard box, her gaze drifting dispassionately over a stack of neatly folded clothes. 10 years of marriage, and her personal belongings were shockingly few. A few business suits, a handful of well-worn books, and the faded memories of a dead-on-arrival marriage. She packed with an astonishing efficiency, showing no sign of sentimentality. Evelyn knew that her swift agreement to sell the house that morning had surely planted a seed of suspicion in the cunning mind of her sister-in-law. When a woman retreats so quickly, those who fancy themselves clever are bound to become suspicious. Especially Jessica, a woman who never missed an opportunity to scrutinize every dollar her sister-in-law spent. A small, knowing smile touched Evelyn's lips. Asterisk. The greedy always die of curiosity. Asterisk. The trap was set. Now it needed the right bait. She gently pulled open a drawer in her vanity, removing a single, yellowed sheet of A4 paper. A photocopy. She tucked it between the pages of an old leather-bound journal and placed it casually under a few silk blouses in an unlocked drawer. A perfect psychological trap had been laid. With that done, Evelyn picked up her canvas tote bag and deliberately made her footsteps heavy on the staircase. Eleanor, I'm just running out to the bakery for a bit. She called into the living room. I have a batch of croissants proofing. She turned and left, the sound of the front door clicking shut behind her. From the laundry room, Jessica's head poked out, her shifty eyes darting around. She waited a full 3 minutes, just to be sure her sister-in-law was gone for good. Jessica quickly wiped her damp hands on her shirt. She tiptoed up the stairs, her movements swift and silent. Asterisk. Agreeing to sell the house that fast, and even wanting to go to the closing right away. No way that witch is just handing over her share to this family. Asterisk, Jessica muttered to herself, each step on the wooden stairs creaking softly. Evelyn's bedroom door was intentionally left ajar. Jessica held her breath and pushed it open. The clean, elegant scent of lavender filled her nostrils, a scent that always ignited a fire of envy within her. The room was half-packed. This level of organization only fueled Jessica's rage. Asterisk, she must be hiding a secret account, stashing cash. There's no way she's leaving this house empty-handed and this calmly. Asterisk, her rough hands tore through the bedding, searching the seams of the mattress. Nothing. Jessica huffed and moved to the wardrobe. She plunged her hands deep into the drawers, rummaging through every corner, hoping to find a hidden bank book to incriminate her sister-in-law. Sweat beaded on her temples. If she could find proof that Evelyn was hiding assets, she'd throw it in her mother's face, and Eleanor would strip Evelyn of every last cent during the split. The room was still empty. Frustrated, Jessica kicked the side of the bed. Just as her patience wore thin, her vulture-like eyes landed on the vanity. The bottom drawer wasn't closed properly. A small gap revealed the dark brown edge of a leather-bound book. Like a predator sensing blood, Jessica lunged forward and yanked the drawer open. The journal lay there, innocently tucked under a few silk shirts. "Gotcha," Jessica hissed, her voice trembling with excitement. "Let's see how many millions you've got stashed away in your little secret fund." Her shaky hands flipped through the crisp, empty pages. There was no list of assets, no safe deposit box codes, just a single sheet of A4 paper, folded in four, tucked into the very last page. Jessica's heart pounded. Asterisk, a secret deed? A loan document? Asterisk. She fumbled to unfold the paper, smoothing it out under the harsh light. The triumphant smirk on her face instantly froze. Her arched eyebrows knitted together, her pupils contracting as she tried to make sense of the bizarre information. It wasn't a bank statement or a property deed. The paper was a grainy photocopy of a map, covered in lines and geometric shapes. In one corner, a box was circled in bright red, filled with dense coordinate data. In the middle of the drawing, in bold, slightly blurred capital letters, were the words asterisk asterisk detailed. Zoning map 1 to 500 scale, Intercounty Corridor Expansion Project. Asterisk asterisk. Jessica's eyes widened. She frantically scanned the notes below the circled area. Next to the string of coordinates was a line of neat, handwritten script in blue ink, Evelyn's unmistakable, infuriatingly elegant handwriting. Asterisk asterisk rear boundary adjacent to easement. No, 4, undeveloped lot. Asterisk asterisk asterisk, undeveloped lot. Asterisk. Jessica's breath hitched. The overgrown, weed-choked patch of land behind the house. The smelly, marshy spot her mother cursed daily as a source of bad feng shui. Why was it sitting there, circled in blazing red, at the heart of a major development plan? Her mind went blank, a tangled mess of confusion. A deeply unsettling premonition slithered down her spine. Just as Jessica stood staring at the photocopy, her mind reeling, the sound of the front door's deadbolt turning echoed up from the ground floor. A dry, metallic click. "Eleanor, I forgot the keys to the pastry case. They're up in the room." Evelyn's voice, clear and unnervingly calm, suddenly rang out from the bottom of the stairs. It was immediately followed by the rhythmic clack times of her heels, slowly, deliberately ascending the wooden steps. The brass bell above the door of the Gilded Spoon patisserie chimed, its clear notes tinkling through the air. Evelyn was carefully whisking a bowl of fresh cream, turning it into stiff, white peaks. The rich scent of French butter and warm vanilla bean wafted from the industrial convection oven, filling the small but cozy space. This was her sanctuary, the only corner of her life for the past decade that hadn't been tainted by Eleanor's barbs or Kevin's spinelessness. A large shadow fell across the sunlit glass door. Evelyn paused and looked up. It was Kevin. Only 5 days after leaving the courthouse, he looked haggard and utterly defeated. His shirt was wrinkled and untucked, his hair greasy with sweat and city grime. Dark circles under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights spent wrestling with columns of debt. Without waiting for an invitation, Kevin pulled a wooden stool up to the counter, plopped down, and let out a long, weary sigh. "Ginger tea or black coffee?" Evelyn asked in an even tone, picking up a clean cloth to wipe away a stray dusting of flour from the marble countertop. "I'm not thirsty." Kevin waved a hand, his shifty eyes scanning the empty at midday bakery. I came to talk." Evelyn just smiled faintly. She pulled up another stool and sat opposite her ex-husband, her back perfectly straight. The pearl clip in her hair caught the light with a glint of defiance. "Between us, other than our appointment at the title company next week, is there anything left to talk about?" Kevin swallowed hard. He nervously wrung his hands, a habit he always fell into when he was about to ask for something. I know the divorce is my fault. I didn't protect you from Mom, but you have to understand my position. I was caught in the middle. My mother on one side, my wife on the other. It's not like my life has been easy." Opening his mouth only to blame his circumstances. The perpetual victim, that was Kevin, the man who had once vowed to shield her with his life. Evelyn didn't interrupt, just watched him. Her gaze was as cold and still as a frozen lake in winter, reflecting all his pathetic weakness back at him. Seeing his ex-wife's silence, Kevin thought he was making headway. He leaned forward, lowering his voice to a pleading whisper. "Evelyn, about selling the house? Mom set the price at $1.2 million. If we split it, you get $600,000. With that kind of money, you could live comfortably for the rest of your life. But it's different for me," Kevin grimaced, his face turning gray. "That last shipment of inventory I imported, it's all tied up in customs. The loan sharks are calling every day, threatening me, vandalizing my office. I'm about to go bankrupt, Evelyn. If I only get $600,000 after I pay off my debts, I'll be left with nothing. Mom will never let me hear the end of it. So what do you want?" Evelyn cut him off, her tone clipped and devoid of emotion. Could you give me a bigger share?" Kevin blinked rapidly, the words he had so carefully rehearsed tumbling out. "You take $250,000. I'll take the remaining $950,000 to cover my debts and start over. I mean, you've lived in my family's house for 10 years, and this bakery only got customers because of my family's name and connections." A heavy silence descended on the bakery, broken only by the low hum of the oven. A wave of pure disgust washed over Evelyn, churning like a violent sea. Yet on the surface, she remained unnervingly still. Spilled water can never be gathered up again. She tilted her head slightly, a thin, deeply sarcastic smile forming on her lips. "Lived in Times Your Times house, because of Times Your Times family's name." Evelyn enunciated each word, every syllable a brick thrown at the face of his ingratitude. In 2016, who drained $80,000 of her own savings to bail out your failing startup. In 2018, who took out a second mortgage on her own mother's home to pay off Jessica's gambling debts. My 10 years of youth, serving as an unpaid maid to your mother, waiting on your family hand and foot, so much so that the stress caused me to miscarry our first child. And now you stand here and dare to haggle with me over $250,000 versus $950,000? Kevin's face went from pale to a deep, blotchy red. He gaped, speechless in the face of the truths Evelyn had just unsheathed. "Listen to me carefully, Kevin." Evelyn shot to her feet, her slender frame radiating an overwhelming force. "That $1.2 million, by law, is split down the middle. My $600,000 is mine, down to the last cent. Don't you dare try to play the shared history card with me. Any history we had died the day you stood by and watched your mother throw me out of the house." The steely, absolute refusal from Evelyn made something in Kevin snap. When the weak can no longer manipulate with tears, they use rage to mask their own pathetic state. Asterisk crack, asterisk. Kevin slammed his fist on the marble countertop. A glass of water trembled, sloshing a few drops onto the surface. His eyes were bloodshot, the veins in his neck bulging with fury. "You dare to be so petty, so calculating with my family?" he roared, shedding the last of his pitiful facade. You think $600,000 is so much? Let me tell you something. A cold, heartless woman like you holding that money won't find any happiness with it. You go ahead and cling to your precious share, just like you cling to that useless, rotten patch of swamp behind the house. A stagnant pond, bad energy, a place where nothing but mosquitoes and rats can thrive. It suits a stubborn, bitter woman like you perfectly. Kevin spewed the most venomous words he could conjure, a torrent of curses meant to satisfy his own frustrated rage. He glared at her, triumphant, certain he had just dealt a fatal blow to her pride, but he had no idea. When she heard the phrase useless, rotten patch of swamp, Evelyn's pupils contracted slightly. Her fingers, which had been gripping the edge of the counter, slowly relaxed. Instead of anger or tears in the face of his cruel insults, a chilling, calculating half-smile bloomed on her lips. Asterisk. That useless, rotten patch of swamp. That stagnant, foul pond. Asterisk. Evelyn's terrifying silence made Kevin falter. He stood there, panting, then violently shoved the stool back. It screeched horribly against the tile floor. He turned on his heel and stormed out of the bakery, a lump of impotent fury stuck in his throat. The bell tinkled again and then fell silent. In the air, fragrant with French butter, Evelyn calmly picked up the cloth and meticulously wiped away the spilled water. A man's cowardice can sometimes be the sharpest knife a woman needs to cut out the malignant tumor of her own blind love. He had just denigrated that undeveloped lot as a place of rot and decay. Fine. Let him and his family go blind over their paltry $500,000. They were still dreaming of a fat payout, of stripping her of her last assets. Next week, at the title company, the moment the deed for the front house was signed over and the red stamp of the notary hit the paper, would also be the moment that the useless, rotten patch of swamp he had just scorned would officially become the most brutal, devastating sentence for his family's bottomless greed. Kevin's retreating back vanished at the sun-scorched intersection, taking with it his flimsy excuses and the inherent cowardice of a failed man. The wind chime above the bakery door tinkled a few more weary notes before falling silent. The shop was so quiet that Evelyn could hear the faint crackling of the baguette crusts cooling on a thin aluminum tray. Not even the rich aroma of French butter and warm vanilla could erase the bitter aftertaste of a conversation steeped in cold calculation and a complete absence of loyalty. Evelyn raised a hand to brush a stray lock of hair from her forehead. Her slender fingers lightly touched the white pearl clip at the crown of her head. The cool sensation of the pearls against her skin was a reminder of the steely resolve she had to maintain. This clip was the last memento her mother had left her before she passed away. A silent lesson that a woman, no matter how crushed and buried in the darkest depths of the sea, must gather her own wounds and crystallize them into a shining pearl. She walked slowly to the glass door, turned the metal deadbolt, and flipped the small wooden sign to closed. This afternoon, she needed absolute silence, a sterile space free from hurried customers, petty receipts, and above all, the haunting ghosts of her past life named the Miller family. Evelyn retreated behind the cream-colored curtain that separated the storefront from the kitchen. Tucked away behind towering stacks of imported flour sacks, hidden under the cold stainless steel prep table, was a small, silent safe. For 10 years as a daughter-in-law, she had never had a single corner of the Miller house that was truly her own. Every drawer could be rummaged through by her mother-in-law under the guise of cleaning. Every notebook could be snooped through by her prying sister-in-law. This safe, located in the bakery she had built from her own meager capital, was her last fortress, the repository of her survival, and the hiding place of her counter-offensive weapon. She knelt on the tiled floor, her hand reaching for the cool electronic keypad. Asterisk, beep, 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 asterisk. Each dry, clipped tone echoed the decisive tap of her fingers. 6 digits flashed on the green LED screen. 150818. It wasn't their wedding anniversary, not Kevin's birthday, nor some random, meaningless code. The 15th of May 2018. It was the birthday of her greatest pain, the day Evelyn had personally snuffed out the last vestiges of her own naive blindness in this rotten marriage. Asterisk click. Asterisk. The heavy steel bolt retracted, like the sigh of time finally released after years of suffocating confinement. The memory flooded back, sharp and cold, like the freezing rain that had lashed against the window pane that year. A night in mid-August, the rain coming down in sheets, flooding the small lane in front of their house. Kevin had come home in tatters, a gash on his forehead bleeding through the mud, pursued to their very doorstep by 3 menacing loan sharks. His business had collapsed, and his off-the-books debts had ballooned into the hundreds of thousands. Eleanor had wailed, collapsing onto the cold floor, clutching at Evelyn's pants and screaming with vicious intensity. A woman marries a man. She shares his burdens. So Kevin was foolish, and his business failed. But he's your husband. You're his wife. You have to co-sign this loan, put your salary up as collateral to pay it off. Do you want to just stand there and watch them chop my son into pieces? A flash of lightning outside tore the sky apart, illuminating Kevin's pale, cowardly face as he cowered in a corner. He looked at her, his eyes begging, swimming in his own pathetic weakness. Evelyn had stood there, her chest a hollow void, every hope of a strong shoulder to lean on shattered into a million pieces. She turned and walked into their room, emerging not just with the loan guarantee forms, but with another paper. She slapped a pen down on the glass table and looked her husband straight in the eye, her voice devoid of any affection. I'll sign, but before I mortgage my future for this debt, Kevin, you have to sign something for me. She smoothed out a handwritten agreement. Last year, my mother passed away and left me an inheritance of $30,000. I used that money to purchase the undeveloped, marshy lot behind this house. Kevin, sign here. Acknowledge that this lot is the sole and separate property of Evelyn Reed, acquired with my own separate funds. You have no rights, no claims, and no involvement with it whatsoever. You sign this, and I'll sign the loan papers to save your skin. At that moment, Kevin was like a drowning man grasping at a straw. He had laughed, a bitter, mocking sound, and snatched the paper without even reading it carefully. That garbage heap? You think it's a treasure? Fine, give it here. I'll sign. Keep your swamp and enjoy it. Eleanor, standing nearby, had sneered and clutched her chest in relief, thinking her daughter-in-law had gone mad, trading a mountain of debt for a worthless, mosquito-infested bog. Yes, they had been so smug. He had hastily scribbled his signature on the agreement, completely unaware that with that one ignorant stroke of the pen, he had just hammered the final nail into the coffin of his family's greed. 6 years later, back in the quiet of her bakery, Evelyn blinked, banishing the image of that long-ago storm. She reached deep into the safe and pulled out a slim, crimson-colored document folio, hidden beneath a layer of protective paper. Opening it, she saw not glittering jewels, but a crisp, clean property deed. On the first page, under grantee, there was only one name, printed in bold, proud, and solitary letters. Asterisk, asterisk, Evelyn Reed. Asterisk, asterisk, tucked securely inside the plastic sleeve of the deed, was the handwritten waiver of interest from 2018. Kevin's signature had faded slightly to a lighter blue over time, but it was still there, intact, as sharp and final as a death sentence for a traitor. There would be no legal loopholes, no opportunity for a dramatic scene at the closing to save them now. Evelyn caressed the textured cover of the folio. The smile on her lips was no longer one of bitter sarcasm, but of the absolute liberation of reason. She had endured for this day for too long, suffered enough degradation to sharpen her weapon to a razor's edge. The net was cast, the trap was sprung. All that was left was for the greedy, mesmerized prey to walk right into it. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. The shrill ring of her cell phone vibrated violently on the flour-dusted marble countertop. Evelyn glanced at the flashing screen. A familiar number appeared, along with the saved contact name, asterisk, asterisk, Mr. Peterson, old neighbor. Asterisk, asterisk, the insistent ringing of the phone tore through the butter-scented air of the bakery. Evelyn took a deep breath, gently stroked the cover of the crimson folio, tucked it securely into her handbag, and then swiped her finger across the screen. Hello, Mr. Peterson, this is Evelyn. On the other end, the voice of the man in his late 50s was slightly distorted by a weak signal, but his tone was filled with an unusual urgency. Evelyn! In about 15 minutes, Can you meet me at the Daily Grind coffee shop, the one at the corner of our old street by the big oak tree? I have something I need to give you in person. Absolutely cannot discuss it over the phone. Please, hurry. Before Evelyn could reply, Mr. Peterson hung up. The dial tone buzzed with a sterile regularity. Evelyn narrowed her eyes, looking through the bakery window. The early June sun was beating down on the black asphalt, creating shimmering, suffocating heat waves. She carefully double-locked the safe, drew the sunshades, and quickly wheeled her scooter off the sidewalk. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but her mind was now a place of supreme, cold clarity. The Daily Grind was nestled under the sprawling canopy of an ancient oak tree. It had once been a favorite weekend spot for Evelyn, before the crushing weight of her marriage had squeezed out the last drops of her leisure time. Worn wicker chairs were tucked against simple wooden tables, filmed with a layer of dust. The drone of cicadas from the leaves, mixed with the rhythmic chimes of the ceiling fan, creating an atmosphere thick with the breath of a blue-collar summer afternoon. As Evelyn kicked down the stand of her scooter, she spotted Mr. Peterson sitting in the most secluded corner of the cafe. He wore a plain, short-sleeved polo shirt and a baseball cap pulled low over his forehead. Seeing Evelyn approach, he quickly pushed aside his half-melted iced coffee, his eyes darting around cautiously before he pulled out a chair for her. "Mr. Peterson, what's so urgent you had to call me out in this heat?" Evelyn sat down, lacing her fingers together on the cracked glass tabletop, trying to keep her voice even. "Mr. Peterson didn't answer immediately. He patted the worn, peeling leather briefcase on his lap and slowly extracted a rolled-up sheet of A3 paper. He spread it flat on the table, using 2 heavy glass ashtrays to hold down the corners. "Take a close look," Mr. Peterson said, tapping his calloused index finger on the paper, his voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper. "This morning, the City Planning Commission officially staked out the property lines. This detailed zoning map, 1 to 500 scale, has been stamped and certified. It was approved late last night. The internal notice went out to the local precinct this morning." Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the dense network of lines and professional symbols. Her heart began to pound, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. In the upper left quadrant of the map, a thick, red, dashed line cut directly across a tract of land marked as undeveloped, mixed use. And right at that intersection, the stagnant, marshy plot, the useless swamp that Kevin had so venomously insulted less than 2 hours ago, was now positioned squarely on the edge of the new development. A 6-lane boulevard, a commercial frontage of exactly 25 feet. "Are you sure you cross-referenced the coordinates with my deed?" Evelyn looked up, her deep eyes flashing with a light so sharp it seemed to cut through the oppressive summer heat. "To the inch." "Absolutely positive." Mr. Peterson nodded firmly, a half-admiring, half-satisfied smile on his face. "The entire width of your undeveloped parcel will have direct frontage on the new boulevard. Meanwhile, Eleanor's grand 3-story house in front, while not being demolished, will be permanently stuck in that narrow, dead-end cul-de-sac. Evelyn, when you bought that godforsaken swamp 10 years ago, I thought you were crazy. Turns out you stumbled upon a gold mine. The real estate developers in this area are already in a frenzy, sniffing around for that parcel. A conservative initial estimate puts it at no less than $1.2 million. $1.2 million. The number echoed in Evelyn's mind clear, decisive, and powerful. It wasn't just a stack of paper bills. It was blood, sweat, and 10 years of humiliating tears. It was the price for every insult she had endured from her husband's family, the rightful compensation for a woman who had been used, abused, and bled dry. The suffocating knot that had been tight in her chest for so long finally loosened. Her patient endurance had, at last, borne fruit. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson," Evelyn said, her hand stroking the smooth paper. Her voice was surprisingly calm, but beneath it lay the formidable power of a gathering storm. "Please, just keep this quiet for 1 more week. At 8 a.m. next Wednesday, they will be signing the papers to sell the front house. Only when they have completed that transaction, severing all their own property ties, will I officially reveal this map." Mr. Peterson let out a hearty laugh, slapping his thigh. You are a brilliant strategist, my dear. I can't wait to see the looks on Eleanor's and that useless Kevin's faces when they find out. Their jaws will hit the floor. Don't you worry. My lips are sealed. While Evelyn and Mr. Peterson were finalizing the last moves of their checkmate, just across the street, behind a gray utility pole tangled with wires, a pair of vulture-like eyes was watching. Eleanor was bundled up in a gaudy, floral-patterned sun-blocking jacket, her face half hidden by oversized dark sunglasses. Sweat streamed down her sagging cheeks, smearing her foundation. But she didn't seem to care. Her pudgy hands, adorned with flashy gold-plated rings, trembled as she raised her smartphone. Asterisk. Click. Click. Asterisk. A series of clandestine photos was saved to her phone's memory. She shakily zoomed in on Evelyn's face, then on Mr. Peterson's smug, secretive expression. Eleanor ground her teeth, her breath coming in angry hisses. Aha, you little snake. You told me you were going to the bakery, but you sneak out here to meet with that real estate shark, Peterson. That paper on the table must be a loan agreement or a wire transfer receipt. You're trying to hide assets, set up a secret fund before the split, aren't you? There was no way you'd agree to sell the house and give Kevin his fair share so easily. The more she thought, the more her greed boiled, overpowering the oppressive heat. She quickly put her phone away, her eyes flashing with a venomous plan. She was certain Evelyn was borrowing money to try and outmaneuver them for a larger share of the $1.2 million house sale. Her limited imagination and boundless avarice had completely blinded her. She had no idea that the paper on the table wasn't a secret fund, but a one-way ticket to the abyss of regret for her entire family. Very clever, my dear daughter-in-law, Eleanor muttered, turning and hurrying back toward the shadowy lane. You want to play games? I'll make sure you have no stage left to perform on. I'm calling Rick Flanagan, the realtor, right now to get an offer on this house today. I'm going to squeeze you dry, Evelyn. I'm going to make sure you walk out of my house with nothing. Her bulky shadow stretched long on the sun-baked asphalt, carrying with it a short-sighted scheme that was about to incinerate her own family. The oppressive afternoon heat of June seemed to melt the very asphalt in the cul-de-sac. The air was so thick and still that even the leaves on the maple trees drooped, motionless. Mr. Peterson, briefcase in hand, kick-started his old motorcycle, which sputtered to life. Just as he was navigating the tightest turn in the lane, where the shadow of a moss-covered wall cast a dark patch, a bulky figure swathed in a garish sun-blocking jacket suddenly darted out, blocking his path. Asterisk, screech, asterisk, Mr. Peterson slammed on the brakes. The rear wheel skidded, leaving a short, black mark on the road and letting out a dry, sharp squeal. He frowned, about to yell, when the woman hastily pulled down her thick cloth mask, revealing a face shiny with sweat and a pair of piercing, suspicious eyes. Well, hello there, Mr. Peterson. Where are you off to in such a rush? Eleanor's shrill voice, laced with a false, syrupy friendliness, cut through the air. She stood with one hand on her hip, the other fanning herself with a tattered straw hat. Her beady eyes weren't looking at him, but were constantly darting down to the old leather briefcase wedged between his thighs. Mr. Peterson froze for a second, but remembering Evelyn's instructions, he quickly masked his surprise with a look of feigned awkwardness and a forced, pained smile. Ah, Mrs. Miller, on a hot day like this, you should be inside resting. What are you doing standing out here in the sun? He asked, clearing his throat and deliberately patting his briefcase in a conspicuously protective manner. That small gesture, of course, did not escape the notice of the eagle-eyed mother-in-law. Eleanor gave a hollow laugh, inching closer to the front of the motorcycle. She lowered her voice to a whisper, but each word was as sharp as a razor. How can I rest, Mr. Peterson? My house is in turmoil. My daughter-in-law, ex-daughter-in-law, that is Evelyn, was just packing her things this morning. She said she was going to her bakery, but she looked so flustered, so stressed. You're an old neighbor, and you know the real estate market around here. I happened to be walking by the Daily Grind just now and saw you two talking. It looked so intense, Mr. Peterson. If you have any sympathy for me, please, tell me the truth. Is she trying to borrow money from you? Eleanor narrowed her eyes, waiting. She was certain that with her psychological blitzkrieg, this neighborhood realtor would crack and reveal everything. All of Evelyn's plans to hide money would be exposed right here, right now. Mr. Peterson let out a loud tesk. He ran a hand through his graying hair and sighed dramatically. The performance began. "It's a terrible situation, Mrs. Miller, Mr. Peterson said, his voice dropping into a mournful, confidential tone. "I'm only telling you this out of respect for you and Kevin. Please, keep this to yourself. Evelyn." She called me out here, crying her eyes out. It was heartbreaking. Eleanor's eyes lit up, the sweat on her forehead seeming to evaporate. She leaned forward, pressing him. Crying? What was she crying about? Tell me everything. What else? The divorce? The asset division? Mr. Peterson said, feigning a look over his shoulder before whispering. "She said you valued the house at $1.2 million, and after the split, she'd only get $600,000. But the problem is, she took out high interest, private loans to open that bakery of hers. Now that they're divorced, the lenders are calling in the debt. $600,000 isn't even enough to cover it. She was begging me, asking if I knew any lenders with lower rates, just so she could stay afloat and rent a cheap apartment. Me? I'm just a small-time realtor. I don't have that kind of money to lend. I was just about to advise her to go back and apologize to you. Maybe let Kevin have a larger share, in hopes that you'd take pity on her and help pay off her debts." "Help pay off times her times debts?" Eleanor shrieked, her voice a high-pitched screech like nails on a chalkboard. She quickly clamped a hand over her mouth, her eyes flashing with unrestrained glee. A wave of triumphant joy washed over the greedy woman. Asterisk. So, that's it. Asterisk. All her suspicions about hidden funds and secret assets vanished. Evelyn didn't have money. On the contrary, she was drowning in debt, desperately trying to survive. Her calm demeanor, her quick agreement to sell the house it was all a bluff, a facade to hide the pathetic reality of a woman cornered and out of options. She wanted to sell the house quickly to get cash and pay off her lenders before they started causing trouble. "Oh, Mr. Peterson, you worry too much," Eleanor said with a cruel, dismissive laugh. "In this family, everyone is responsible for their own debts. My Kevin was too kind, too naive, letting that woman manipulate him for years. The court has ruled. They go their separate ways. Her $600,000, whether she burns it on her bakery or something else, is her problem. My family won't contribute a single penny, and you'd be wise not to introduce her to any lenders. You don't want to get mixed up in her mess, Mr. Peterson nodded vigorously, his face a mask of agreement and fear. Yes, I understand. I already refused her flat out. Well, it's hot out. I should get going before she calls and bothers me again." With that, Mr. Peterson revved his engine and sped off, leaving behind a puff of gray smoke and a smug, hidden smile. Eleanor stood alone in the empty lane. The hot wind blew, but she felt a cool, refreshing satisfaction, as if she'd just downed a glass of ice water. Mr. Peterson's perfect performance had completely fooled the short-sighted matriarch. Her misguided triumph had blinded her. Thinking she had discovered her opponent's weakness, she was, in fact, cheerfully slipping a noose around her own neck. Asterisk. Desperate for cash to pay off debts, are we? Asterisk, Eleanor muttered, her eyes glinting with a wicked plan. Asterisk. You think you're getting $600,000 from me that easily? Since you're drowning, I'll push you under. Let's see how arrogant you can be then. Asterisk. Her chubby hand fumbled in her purse, pulling out her smartphone. She scrolled through her contacts, stopping at the name, ***, Rick Flanagan, Realtor VIP. ***, she had to strike while the iron was hot. She had to get this slick operator over to appraise the house this afternoon. When someone is cornered by debt like Evelyn, all you have to do is lowball the price slightly, and they'll sign anything to get their hands on cash. $1.2 million? No. She would do everything in her power to get the official sale price on paper, down to $1 million, maybe even $950,000. The difference? She would pocket it herself, ensuring Evelyn walked away with next to nothing. "Hello, Rick. It's Eleanor Miller," she cooed into the phone, her voice as sweet as honey but laced with venom. "Are you free this afternoon? Get over to my house right away. I have a fantastic opportunity for you. A beautiful house on a prime lot. Needs to be sold times fast asterisk. I need you to get me the absolute lowest possible price. There's a generous commission in it for you." The bulky woman's figure disappeared behind the rusty iron gate, a foolish, blind move that had just set in motion the complete financial ruin of her own family. At exactly 3 p.m., the sweltering heat still clung to the small cul-de-sac. The whine of an expensive scooter's engine cut through the air, ending with a sharp screech of brakes in front of Eleanor Miller's gate. As the gate creaked open, a man in his 40s, wearing a flashy, tight-fitting silk shirt, strode in with an air of arrogance. This was Rick, a notorious realtor in the area, known as Rick the Fox for his ability to sniff out money in messy family property disputes. The cloying scent of cheap cologne filled the air, overpowering the house's characteristic musty smell. Eleanor and Jessica rushed out to greet him, their faces beaming as if they'd struck gold. In stark contrast to their effusive welcome, Evelyn sat quietly in a corner of the sofa, calmly sipping her now cold tea. She wore a simple gray linen dress, her hair neatly styled with its signature pearl clip. Her eyes, calm and cold, watched the realtor's every move, like a hunter observing prey walk into a carefully laid trap. "Eleanor, you're looking fabulous," Rick said with a sly grin, his eyes scanning the living room. "When you called, I had to drop a lunch meeting with a city councilman to race over here. So, what's the situation? How do you want to play this?" "Oh, just go by the market rate, Rick," Eleanor said, glancing pointedly at Evelyn, deliberately raising her voice. "This house was built over a decade ago. The walls have water damage. There's mold in the basement. Take a good look, give us an honest, objective appraisal, so we can see what we can get for a quick as-is sale." Evelyn smirked. What a clumsy performance. Eleanor wanted Rick to appraise the house at the lowest possible value on paper, ensuring Evelyn's 50/50 share would be diminished, while Eleanor secretly pocketed the difference from this broker. The short-sightedness of it all was breathtaking. Rick nodded, pulling a digital measuring tape from his breast pocket. He swaggered around, tapping on the living room walls, clicking his tongue in disapproval at the discolored floor tiles. "Tsk, tsk. The foundation on this place is weak, Eleanor. And this narrow cul-de-sac, a car can't even turn around. Buyers these days are picky. A house in a location like this, you have to factor in major renovation costs." With every criticism from Rick, the expressions on Eleanor and Jessica's faces grew more smug. They were convinced that Evelyn, terrified of her imaginary debts, would be panicking at the thought of the house's value dropping. Yet, Evelyn remained motionless, her gaze fixed on the condensation on her teacup. Her stillness unnerved Rick. A woman about to lose half her assets, yet acting so calm it was a rarity in his line of work. He changed his approach, casually wandering toward the back of the house, to the kitchen that led to a sliding glass door. The afternoon sun slanted through the grimy glass, illuminating a space of overgrown chaos. Rick narrowed his foxy eyes, his steps halting in the doorway. Before him was a wide, neglected lot, with weeds waist-high and a few wild banana trees, their tattered leaves rustling in the breeze. Household trash was strewn about, creating a scene of utter desolation. But behind that desolation, the sharp mind of a seasoned land speculator began to race. He visually measured the width of the lot. It was clearly wider than the house itself. More importantly, he vaguely recalled a rumor he'd heard over drinks last week about a new commercial corridor being planned for the area. If that back lot had direct frontage on the proposed new road, then this shabby house in front was nothing more than a worthless barrier hiding a massive gold mine. Rick's pupils dilated. His heart began to beat faster. He reached out, about to slide the door open to get a better look. Asterisk, click. Asterisk, a small sound, but enough to shatter his greedy train of thought. Evelyn was suddenly standing right behind him. She took a step forward, her slender body intentionally or not blocking his view. Her hand reached out and casually pulled the sliding door halfway shut, obscuring most of the view of the overgrown lot. "Mr. Flanagan," Evelyn's voice was even and cool. "You're a professional. You must know that your appraisal is limited to the deeded property of the main house. Back there is just a garbage heap, an undeveloped patch of swampy land with terrible feng shui. You don't need to trouble yourself with that mess. It was a statement, half joking, half serious, that directly poked at the curiosity of a cunning man. Evelyn deliberately used words like garbage heap, undeveloped land, bad feng shui, the very insults Kevin had thrown at her, but her tone was one of guarded concealment. This was a brilliant psychological move. The more you tell a greedy person not to look, the more convinced they become that a treasure is hidden there. Rick smirked, his eyes scrutinizing Evelyn's calm face. Now, Mrs. Reed, my job is to see value even in the darkest corners. In today's market, what one person calls trash, another might call gold. Evelyn just smiled, an enigmatic smile, and turned back to the living room, leaving just enough of a gap for the slow-burning fuse to be lit. She said nothing more, because she knew her partial concealment had successfully poured gasoline on the fire of the realtor's greed. Eleanor and Jessica scurried after him to the kitchen door, their faces showing clear annoyance at their daughter-in-law's audacity. "Oh, Rick, don't pay any attention to that bitter woman," Eleanor said, with a dismissive wave of her hand. "That stinking patch of weeds has brought nothing but mosquitoes into this house for years. She's just talking nonsense. Just appraise the main house for me, and let's get a price locked in so I can deal with my family matters." Eleanor's foolishness and haste only made Rick more suspicious. One person was trying to hide something, while the other was desperate to offload the property without a second glance. The sixth sense of a professional land shark told him this divorce wasn't just about splitting a $1.2 million house. The real prize was that garbage heap out back. Rick retracted his measuring tape and slipped it into his pocket. He turned to face Eleanor, his expression no longer one of feigned sympathy, but of pure, predatory cunning. The atmosphere in the kitchen suddenly grew heavy, tense as a violin string. "Eleanor," he said, nodding toward the half-open sliding door, his question sharp and direct, cutting through her self-induced fantasy. "What's the deed situation on that back lot?" As Rick the Fox's question hung in the air, the already stuffy kitchen seemed to run out of oxygen. The whining of the old exhaust fan on the ceiling only amplified the suffocating tension. The smell of stale cooking oil and Eleanor's nervous sweat created a nauseating, oppressive atmosphere. "What's the deed situation on that back lot?" Rick repeated, his shrewd eyes still narrowed, boring into the mother-in-law's scowling face. He was probing, searching for any legal clue about the potential gold mine lying dormant behind the sliding glass door. A predator's instinct told him that the next answer would determine the fate of a multi-million-dollar deal. Eleanor just waved her hand dismissively, her face a mask of contempt, as if he had just asked the most absurd question in the world. She tilted her chin up, her shrill voice deliberately loud enough for Evelyn, standing quietly in the corner, to hear. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Rick, why are you even wasting your breath on that? That's a stagnant pond, a swamp. It's not on the same deed as this house. It's a piece of trash that my precious daughter-in-law brought into this family 10 years ago." With that, she shot a look of pure scorn at Evelyn. Jessica, standing beside her, chimed in with a crude, mocking laugh, twisting the knife. "He's right, Rick. Back then, she secretly used her own money to buy that mud pit. My whole family tried to stop her, but we finally just let her make her own stupid mistake. The deed is in her name only. She can keep it and choke on it. Our house is on a solid foundation, with a clean, separate deed that only covers the property on this cul-de-sac. Just give us a price for the $1.2 million house, and forget that garbage heap even exists." The ignorance and short-sightedness of Eleanor and her daughter were laid bare under the dim kitchen light. They were so blinded by the $1.2 million in front of them that they were eagerly drawing a clear line in the sand, pushing that piece of trash out of the negotiation without a second thought. They were convinced that this clear demarcation would help them get rid of Evelyn faster, more cleanly. The greedy are always in a hurry, and in their haste, they were cheerfully digging their own graves, burying their hopes and their future. Evelyn leaned against the doorframe, her arms loosely crossed. She listened to their cruel taunts without a word of protest. Instead, she had to suppress a deeply sarcastic smile that threatened to bloom on her lips. A feeling of intense, exhilarating satisfaction was rising within her, like a powerful silent tide. Asterisk. Wonderful. Asterisk. They were voluntarily confirming, in front of a witness, a seasoned, ruthless realtor, that the $1.2 million lot had absolutely nothing to do with them. They were screaming to protect their hollow $1.2 million shell, while willingly throwing away the key to the real treasure. For 10 years, they had trampled on her dignity, calling her property garbage. Now, that very same blind arrogance would be their undoing. "Ah, I see," Rick drawled, his eyebrows raising slightly. In his mind, the pieces of the puzzle clicked perfectly into place. The daughter-in-law's mud pit, the rumored commercial corridor project, and the terrifyingly calm demeanor of the woman with the pearl clip. He swallowed hard, trying to hide the excitement coursing through his veins. This was it. A gold mine, served up on a silver platter by the fools who owned the land right next to it. Rick cleared his throat, regaining his professional composure. He turned to Eleanor, his tone now brisk and all business. "Well, if the deeds are that clearly separated, it makes my job easier. Eleanor, this house, with its weak foundation and narrow access, makes $1.2 million a bit of a stretch in this market. But, because we're friends, and I happen to have a cash buyer who's eager to get into this neighborhood, I have a proposition. If you and Mrs. Reed here agree to sign and close on the sale of just this main house, for the price of $1.2 million, I can get my client to put down a hard, non-refundable deposit tonight. We can be at the title company for the closing early next week. What do you say? Can you make a quick decision?" The words "quick decision" hit Eleanor's weak spot, remembering Mr. Peterson's story from that afternoon. She was utterly convinced that Evelyn was drowning in debt and desperate for cash. A fast closing was the only way to get that troublemaker out of her house, before she could try any other tricks to get more money. "Of course, we can. Absolutely." Eleanor slapped her thigh, her eyes lighting up like high beams. $1.2 million it is. It's a done deal. Evelyn, did you hear that? Rick has set the price. Do you agree to sell this part of the house, or are you going to start playing games and demanding more? The eyes of all three people in the kitchen turned to Evelyn. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the tick-tock of the clock in the living room. Evelyn lifted her head. The late afternoon sun slanted through the window, illuminating her elegant, composed face. She looked at her mother-in-law's greedy excitement, her sister-in-law's arrogant anticipation, and finally, at the realtor's cunning, probing gaze. "Fine," Evelyn nodded, her voice soft but firm, each syllable clear and distinct. "I agree. I will sell my share of this main house for a total price of $1.2 million. Whatever paperwork needs to be done, have Kevin arrange it. We'll be at the closing next week." "Excellent. That's a reasonable woman," Eleanor cackled, her triumphant, shrill laughter echoing through the kitchen. Jessica also stuck her nose in the air, giving her mother a victorious nudge. The two of them, overjoyed, began to flatter Rick, inviting him into the living room for tea, already planning how they would call Kevin to share the news of their victory. Eleanor waddled out first, with Jessica close behind, chattering nonstop about how she would spend her share of the money. Soon, only Evelyn and Rick were left in the kitchen. As the two women disappeared from view, Rick paused at the threshold of the kitchen. He turned back, his expression no longer that of a simple broker, but of a cunning wolf on the hunt. He looked at Evelyn, then glanced back at the overgrown lot behind the sliding door. Rick smirked, then gave Evelyn a subtle, knowing wink. He lowered his voice, just enough for the two of them to hear. "A 2.5-foot frontage on the new boulevard. Congratulations, ma'am, on holding onto your $1.2 million mud pit. An outstanding performance." The fox had seen through the act, but Evelyn showed no sign of surprise or alarm. She met his shrewd gaze with eyes as cold and deep as a frozen lake. Her lips were set in a firm line. She slowly raised a slender finger to her lips, a clear, unmistakable signal for absolute silence. It was a wordless command, sharp and powerful. This game had only just begun. The net was cast, the bait had been taken. The greatest secrets must remain buried until the moment the ink is dry at the closing. The first one to speak would ruin the entire, perfect play. Rick understood the rules of this game of high-stakes real estate. He nodded, his grin widening in admiration. He adjusted the collar of his silk shirt and swaggered into the living room, leaving Evelyn alone in the quiet shadows of the kitchen, calmly counting down the hours to the final judgment. The late June dusk painted streaks of fiery red across the sky, settling over the traffic-choked streets of downtown Boston. In stark contrast to the noisy, suffocating heat outside, the 15th floor office of Vance and Associates, attorneys at law, was quiet and so cold you could hear the rustle of a single sheet of paper. The smell of fresh toner and bitter espresso created an atmosphere of professionalism, principle, and extreme caution. Evelyn sat with her back straight in a plush leather chair, her hands clasped neatly on the glass-topped conference table. The pearl clip in her hair cast a cool glint under the sterile fluorescent lights. Across from her sat Arthur Vance, a man in his late 50s, renowned for his ice-cold logic and his uncanny ability to sniff out the slightest risk in contentious family asset disputes. 10 years of living with the Miller family's deceit had taught Evelyn a painful lesson. Never go into battle without ensuring every last buckle on your armor is fastened. The fact that the realtor, Rick, had smelled a rat this afternoon was a blaring alarm. The Millers were greedy and foolish, but also dangerously reckless. She needed an airtight legal shield to sever any and all of their grasping claws. On the table before them, the documents were laid out. The finalized divorce decree with the court's seal, the joint deed for the 3-story house, the detailed 1 to 500 zoning map with its official stamp, and finally, the separate, clean deed for the backlot, bearing only one name, Evelyn Reed. Arthur Vance pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose, using the tip of his fountain pen to trace the lines on the zoning map. He nodded slowly, his eyes showing a clear admiration for the woman's deep, calculated strategy. Evelyn, I've reviewed your entire plan, Mr. Vance said, his voice a calm, steady baritone. Your tactic of feigning weakness to get them to rush the sale of the main house is a brilliant psychological move. As planned, next Wednesday, the purchase and sale agreement for the front house will be signed at the closing. The moment you and Kevin have both signed, and the notary has affixed their seal, your ownership of that $1.2 million property officially ends. The transaction will be complete, and he will have permanently forfeited any and all rights to that marital asset. Evelyn took a sip of water, her gaze unwavering. And the moment that contract becomes legally binding, I will produce the zoning map and the deed to my $1.2 million property. Mr. Vance, according to Massachusetts general laws, Chapter 208, Section 34, separate property acquired through inheritance and maintained separately is not subject to division. I need to be 100% certain that when I reveal my hand, they cannot use any legal maneuver to halt the proceedings or challenge my ownership of that land. At this, Mr. Vance suddenly paused. He set his Mont Blanc pen down on the table with a sharp, definitive click times that cut through the silence. The veteran lawyer's brow furrowed, his expression turning serious. Your plan is psychologically flawless, he said, steepling his fingers. But from a practical, legal standpoint at the closing itself, I must warn you of a potentially fatal loophole. Evelyn's brow twitched, her heart sinking slightly. She sat up even straighter. What loophole, Mr. Vance? Mr. Vance looked her directly in the eye. The law values evidence, not emotion. You bring the deed with only your name on it, that's good. But the law also allows for challenges. If an asset is acquired during the marriage, even if it's in one spouse's name, the other spouse can dispute it. The burden of proof would be on you to demonstrate, with irrefutable evidence, that the funds used were entirely separate. If you can't, a judge could still be persuaded to consider it a marital asset subject to division. He paused, letting his words sink in. Eleanor and her children are greedy and have no scruples. When they learn that land is worth $1.2 million, do you think they'll just quietly accept it? No, they will cause a scene right there at the title company. Kevin will scream that he gave you the money to buy it, or that the money came from a joint account. Eleanor will call the police, file an emergency injunction to halt all transactions, claiming fraud and concealment of assets. Even if you eventually win in court, the legal battle could drag on for years. You'd be bled dry by legal fees and exhausted by their dirty, psychological warfare. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. He was right. She had been too confident in her deed, forgetting the shameless, relentless nature of Kevin's family. When a cornered animal sees its prize snatched away, it will lash out with rabid, lawless fury. The fake tears, the blatant lies, she had endured it all for a decade. If she gave them even a sliver of an opportunity to play the victim at the closing, her brilliant reversal would dissolve into a disgusting, muddy brawl. Seeing her silence, Mr. Vance leaned forward, tapping the glass table. His voice dropped, filled with authority. To shut them down instantly, to shatter any argument they could possibly make, to give them not a single second to react. You are missing one crucial weapon, and it's not this deed. What do I need? Evelyn clutched her handbag, her voice barely a whisper in the twilight-filled room. Mr. Vance looked her straight in the eye, enunciating each word. You need the Times Original Times waiver of interest that Kevin signed in 2018. The photocopy you sent me is worthless in front of a notary. They can claim it was altered or forged. You must have the original document, with Kevin's own handwritten, blue ink signature, acknowledging that he voluntarily relinquished all rights to that property. That signature, combined with the original file of his massive debts from that year, will create an ironclad legal shield, a noose that will tighten around their necks the moment they open their mouths. The original waiver. And the file of his 2018 debts. Evelyn's pupils contracted, a chill running down her spine. Earlier that day at the bakery, she had only checked the deed, but the original, handwritten waiver and the thick file of Kevin's loan shark documents, she remembered it now. Fearing Jessica's snooping, she had, years ago, secretly placed them in a rusty old cookie tin and buried it at the bottom of a cardboard box in the dusty, neglected storage attic on the third floor of her mother-in-law's house. She was living in a den of wolves, and the one weapon that could slay them was hidden right in the heart of their lair. The night descended on the city, bringing with it the oppressive, suffocating heat of a peak summer heat wave. Leaving the lawyer's office, Evelyn drove straight back to the three-story house in the quiet cul-de-sac. The dark, silent street was a stark contrast to the chaotic storm of calculations raging in her mind. Mr. Vance's steely warning echoed in her ears, as sharp as a blade at her throat. The law has no room for wishful thinking. The law demands ironclad proof. And that proof, the original waiver signed by Kevin in 2018, was currently languishing in the very den of the thieves who would stop at nothing to get their hands on it. Evelyn inserted her key into the lock and turned it soundlessly. The bolt slid back, without disturbing the loud, obnoxious sounds coming from the living room. Through the crack in the door, the flickering light of the television cast dancing shadows. Eleanor was lounging on the sofa, a calculator in hand, muttering numbers to herself. Beside her, Jessica was loudly cracking sunflower seeds and cackling about all the designer bags and jewelry she would buy with the proceeds from the sale. They were lost in a drunken stupor of their own making, wrapped in a fantastical dream of a $1.2 million payday. Their ignorance was the perfect cover for Evelyn. She held her breath, slipped off her heels, and moved like a shadow through the dim hallway towards the stairs. Each step on the old wooden staircase groaned softly, a familiar protest under her weight. 10 years in this house had taught her which floorboards creaked, which corners to avoid. She moved with absolute silence, but inside her chest, her heart hammered like a war drum. Time was running out. After her call with the realtor, Eleanor could schedule the closing for any day now. If she didn't retrieve that original document tonight, her entire plan for a stunning reversal could go up in smoke, paving the way for their filthy, victim-playing tactics. The third floor, a place of perpetual silence, a tomb for discarded furniture, and the decaying memories of her husband's family. Evelyn gently pushed open the warped wooden door to the storage room. A wave of thick, dry air, carrying the stale smell of mothballs, rodent droppings, and ancient dust, hit her, making her choke back a cough. The room, about 150 square feet, was crammed with teetering stacks of cardboard boxes, broken fans, and moldy winter rugs. The heat radiating down from the roof turned the space into a sweltering, airless oven. Evelyn didn't dare turn on the overhead light, Its glare could be seen by neighbors or arouse suspicion from below. She used her phone's flashlight, set to its lowest brightness, casting a weak, ghostly green light over the cluttered mess. A hazy memory from 6 years ago surfaced. After forcing Kevin to sign the waiver in exchange for her covering his gambling debts, Evelyn had carefully sealed the document, along with his entire file of loan shark papers, in a waterproof plastic bag. She had then placed it in an old tin cookie box and buried it at the very bottom of a large cardboard box labeled winter clothes. The most dangerous place is the safest place. She had bet that a lazy, entitled person like Jessica would never drag herself up to this spider-infested furnace to clean. Asterisk, where is it? Which box? Asterisk, Evelyn bit her lip, sweat soaking the back of her silk blouse. She carefully moved a broken lamp, shifted a rolled-up rug, her movements slow and deliberate to avoid making any noise. Dust filled the air, swirling in the flashlight's beam, settling on her hair and the pristine pearl clip. Her slender hands pushed past cobwebs, reaching into the darkest corner of the room. There. A cardboard box, its corner torn, with the faded marker inscription, Winter, 2017. Evelyn knelt on the grimy floor. Holding her breath, she tore away the yellowed packing tape and plunged her hands into a musty pile of old sweaters. The cool, rough feel of metal against her fingertips sent a jolt through her entire nervous system. This was it. The rusty tin box, a silent witness holding the final verdict for the Miller family. She quickly pulled the box out and placed it on her lap. The latch was rusted shut. Evelyn used her thumbnail, gritting her teeth and prying it open with all her strength. Asterisk screech. Asterisk. The dry, unoiled hinge let out a sharp, piercing sound that ripped through the night's silence. The sound, though small, felt like a thunderclap in the quiet attic. Evelyn flinched, slamming her hand down on the lid, holding her breath, and listening for any sound from downstairs. The TV was still blaring, Jessica's shrill laughter still faintly audible. Evelyn let out a shaky breath, wiping a bead of sweat from the corner of her eye. She lifted the lid. In the dim light of her phone, the waterproof plastic bag was still intact. She tore it open and pulled out a stack of yellowed papers. And there, right on top, was the handwritten waiver, Kevin's familiar blue ink signature clear and undeniable. Asterisk voluntarily relinquish all rights, separate property, no contest, asterisk. Each line, each sloppy signature from that cowardly man had now become the ultimate weapon, powerful and utterly ruthless. Beneath it was the thick stack of loan shark contracts, with Kevin's red ink thumbprints stark against the paper. This mountain of ironclad proof, when presented at the closing, would instantly shatter every lie, every false claim from Eleanor and her children. No legal body on earth could dispute its absolute validity. A cold, triumphant smile spread across Evelyn's lips. Her hand trembled with suppressed excitement. The final knot had been untied. The play now had a flawless, airtight script. But just as Evelyn was about to fold the papers and put them in her bag, an unusual sound came from the staircase outside. Asterisk. Shh, 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 shh. Asterisk. The sound of slippers dragging on the wooden steps. Not hurried steps, but slow, cautious, calculated ones. The sound grew clearer, then stopped directly outside the storage room door. The air in the room instantly froze. Evelyn's heart felt as if it had been seized in a vice. In the crack beneath the door, a dark shadow fell, blocking the faint light from the hallway. Someone was outside, listening. She held her breath, her hand clenching the papers so tightly her knuckles turned white. As fast as she could, she hid the file behind her back and reached for her phone to turn off the flashlight. But it was too late. Asterisk click, crack, bang. Asterisk the doorknob was violently twisted, and the flimsy wooden door flew open, slamming against the wall with a sickening crash. The harsh fluorescent light from the hallway flooded the room, brutally exposing Evelyn, kneeling amidst the clutter. And there, standing in the doorway with her hands on her hips, was Jessica. Her vulture-like eyes swept across the room, then locked onto her sister-in-law's awkward, compromising position. The corner of her bright red, overdrawn lips curled into a nasty, triumphant sneer. Well, 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 my dear sister-in-law, Jessica's voice was a high-pitched, grating screech, like a crow cawing in the night. Sneaking around in this garbage dump in the middle of the night? What exactly are you hiding behind your back? The harsh fluorescent light from the hallway cast a long, grotesque shadow of Jessica across the dusty floor, a menacing figure blocking the only exit. The air in the storage room grew thick, tense, and ready to snap. Asterisk whir whir whir. Asterisk, the old ceiling fan from the second floor whirred on, its dry, rhythmic blades sounding like the countdown on a time bomb. Jessica stood with her hands planted firmly on her hips, her sharp chin jutted out. Her greedy eyes, gleaming with avarice, scanned the mess before finally locking onto the hands Evelyn was desperately trying to conceal behind her back. The sneer on her heavily lipsticked mouth twisted into a look of pure malice. "Cat got your tongue, busted red-handed, and now you're speechless?" Jessica shrieked, taking another step into the sweltering room. "I knew it. Downstairs. I had a feeling. The way you were tiptoeing around, you can't fool me. Coming up here in the middle of the night, digging through this trash heap, you're obviously stashing cash, hiding a secret bank account, or gold bars, trying to smuggle assets out of this house before the split. You'd better hand over whatever you're hiding right now. If you don't, I'll scream for Mom. And when she gets up here, don't blame us for being merciless and stripping you bare in front of the whole world." The shrill, threatening words echoed in the confined space. If this were the Evelyn of 10 years ago, the naive girl who still believed in love and family duty, she might have panicked, broken into a cold sweat at this blatant, false accusation. But the 38-year-old woman with the white pearl clip simply blinked. Her silence was deep, cold, and as dangerous as a frozen lake. Her chest rose and fell evenly, her mind a razor-sharp instrument of calculation. She knew that in her hands, she held not only the $1.2 million waiver, but also a thick file of Kevin's loan shark debts, papers stained with his red ink thumbprints. To fight fire with fire, especially with someone as greedy and cowardly as Jessica, there was no psychological weapon more brutally effective than throwing a cold, hard, risky truth right in their face. Evelyn slowly rose to her feet. She calmly brushed the dust from the knees of her linen trousers. Her indifferent, superior demeanor made Jessica's triumphant sneer falter. Without a word of defense, without a hint of fear, Evelyn suddenly swung her arm forward. Asterisk hump, asterisk. With a rough, violent sound, the entire stack of papers creased, yellowed, and stained was thrown onto a dusty cardboard box right at Jessica's feet. A cloud of fine dust billowed up, swirling in the dim light. However, the $1.2 million waiver had been deftly rolled up and was now held securely in the palm of Evelyn's left hand, hidden behind her back. What lay exposed before Jessica was a terrifying mountain of debt: mortgage defaults, high-interest loan agreements, and pawnshop receipts. "You want to see what dark secret I'm hiding?" Evelyn's voice was low, not angry, but each word carried the crushing weight of a boulder dropped into a bottomless pit. "Look closely, Jessica. Open your eyes and read. The reason I'm up here, digging through this rotten dump in the middle of the night, breathing in dust and mold, is to find this mountain of debt that your brother signed back in 2018. The moment she heard the word debt, Jessica flinched, instinctively taking a step back. Her shifty eyes darted down to the papers. Bold, black letters screamed at her. Asterisk, asterisk, high-interest daily loan. Asset pledge agreement. Personal guarantee. Asterisk, asterisk. The official-looking stamps and red ink seals of various shady lending outfits were like needles jabbing at her eyes. Jessica's chest heaved, her earlier triumphant grin shattering. It was replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic on her now ashen face. Evelyn didn't stop. She took a step forward, the heel of her shoe striking the floor with a sharp Times clack asterisk, creating an invisible pressure that bore down on her sister-in-law's fragile psyche. "Next week, at the closing, you think this family is just going to walk away with $600,000 and live happily ever after?" Evelyn's lips curled into a cruel, mocking smile. "Those loan sharks out there? They smelled the money from this house sale a long time ago. What do you think your brother used as collateral? His life? You think they're just going to let your mother and you take that money and go on a shopping spree? I'm desperately trying to find these disgusting papers to figure out which debts belong to him and which ones are from that old gambling mess of times, yours, asterisk, so I can have something to show those thugs when they show up, to keep them from throwing paint and filth all over this house the moment the money is wired. Evelyn's voice was ice cold, sharp as a razor, cutting straight to the most cowardly part of Jessica's soul. Or maybe, Evelyn leaned in, gesturing to the pile of debt. You want to pick these up? Take them downstairs to Mom. Tell her that tomorrow, she can use the $600,000 from the house sale to pay off the blood debt for her darling son. And for what's left over, maybe you can get a job and help pay it off. Go on, pick them up. Call Mom up here and show her what you caught me with. Blood debt, loan sharks, throwing paint. These phrases were like a chainsaw tearing through Jessica's greedy facade. She was a freeloader, a master of pointing fingers while hiding her own hands. She knew her brother was a terrible businessman. She had seen the shady characters lurking at the end of their street. If she got involved with these papers, what if the creditors dragged her into it? Demanded a share of her inheritance to pay off the debt? The $1. $2 million was still just a number on a screen, and now she was supposed to invite a gang of thugs into her life? Jessica's face turned a deathly white, her lips trembling. Are you crazy? Who would want to touch your disgusting trash? She hissed in terror, backing away towards the stairs. That's Kevin's business. His debts are his problem. I don't know anything about this. It has nothing to do with me. Don't you dare try to drag me into your filthy mess. Mom said your debts are your own to deal with. Without waiting for a reply, Jessica spun around and scrambled down the stairs as if the devil himself were chasing her. The frantic slapping of her slippers echoed down the stairwell, along with her panicked, ragged breaths, leaving the storage room door swinging open in her wake. The third floor quickly returned to its suffocating silence. Evelyn stood motionless in the dark, listening until the sound of Jessica's footsteps was completely absorbed by the noise of the TV downstairs. Only then did she close her eyes and let out a long, quiet sigh of relief. She brought her left hand, still clenched behind her back, into the light. In the dim glow of her phone's flashlight, the original waiver of interest, signed by Kevin, was safe, flat, and perfectly preserved. The silver bullet was secure. Once again, the enemy's own stupidity, selfishness, and cowardice had become her most effective shield. Evelyn carefully folded the small piece of paper and tucked it deep into a hidden zippered pocket inside her gray handbag. The psychological trap was set. The truth had been twisted into a fear that now blinded her entire family-in-law. Everything was ready. All that remained was one final hurdle, a farewell dinner steeped in calculation, the night before the final judgment. The final dinner in the 3-story house took place in an atmosphere so heavy and suffocating it felt like breathing in stone dust. The rusty ceiling fan turned with a lazy, rhythmic times whir-whir asterisk, pushing down waves of hot, humid air that carried the smell of burnt fried fish and sour, over-fermented sauerkraut. In 10 years as a daughter-in-law, not once had Evelyn enjoyed a peaceful meal. For a decade, this dinner table had been her pillory, a place where she endured Eleanor's constant criticism, long, disappointed sighs, and her husband's thoughtless complaints. Tonight, the seating was the same, but her status had changed. The divorce decree was a clean, sharp cut, forever dividing the oak table she had once polished with such care. Eat, Evelyn. Have some fish. Eleanor's voice, sharp and cold, shattered the tense silence. She tapped her serving chopsticks against the side of a bowl, a series of sharp, irritating clicks. A thin, fake smile played on her lips. This is your last meal at this table. Starting tomorrow, we go our separate ways. You've eaten at this family's table for 10 years. The least you can do is leave on a decent note, don't you think? Evelyn paused, her chopsticks hovering. She looked at the woman who was so shamelessly playing the role of the magnanimous matriarch. Decent. The word, coming from the mouth of the woman who had ruthlessly drained her youth and forced her to carry her son's gambling debts, tasted like ash. Mom's right, Jessica chimed in from across the table, chewing loudly. Her eyes glittered with unbridled excitement. Tomorrow, this whole mess is over. Cash on the barrel, $1.2 million, split down the middle, ex-sister-in-law, you can take your $600,000 and go pay off those loan sharks before they start vandalizing this house. As for my brother Kevin, he's got big plans. So, you should probably get your things packed. As soon as the papers are signed tomorrow afternoon, you need to be out. We have to hand the keys over to the new owners. They're bringing in a bulldozer to tear this dump down. Their cruelty was wrapped in the language of cold, hard business. They were desperate to be rid of her, to erase every trace of her from this house, all to make way for the $1.2 million that was dancing madly in their heads. Not one of them remembered the nights she had stayed up to care for Eleanor when she was sick, nor did they care how exhausted she had been propping up Kevin's failed company. Evelyn didn't respond. She just lowered her head and ate a few grains of cold rice. Her silence was not submission. It was the supreme self-control of a bomb counting down to detonation. The waiver, her silver bullet, was resting safely in the hidden pocket of her handbag upstairs. She would swallow every insult tonight and metabolize it into a venom she would serve them 100-fold tomorrow morning. Seeing Evelyn's silence, Eleanor assumed she was defeated and weak, crushed by the imaginary debt Jessica had invented. Smugly, she served herself more rice and cleared her throat, getting to the real purpose of this calculated meal. Tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m. sharp, at the title company on the main street, Eleanor announced, her eyes locked on Evelyn's. Rick the realtor has everything set up with the buyer. We're signing everything over in one go. Be on time. Don't play games, and don't try to change your mind at the last minute. Bring all your identification, the deed, everything. Once you sign, the deal is done. A fair split. Understood? Once you sign, the deal is done. A fair split. Evelyn's lips curled into a thin, cold smile. Don't worry, Eleanor, she said, setting down her chopsticks, her voice soft but every syllable distinct. I gave my word. I will be there at 8:30 a.m., not a minute late, and I have prepared all the necessary documents to ensure everything is settled fairly and cleanly, so no one feels cheated or has any lingering attachments. Her words carried a razor-sharp double meaning. Eleanor and Jessica, however, heard only what they wanted to hear. They beamed, convinced their prey had walked willingly into the trap, ready to surrender half the house to escape her debts. They had no idea that the necessary documents Evelyn referred to were the gleaming zoning map and the $1.2 million waiver for the land out back. They were smugly trying to snare a tiger with a single, thin thread. While the three women engaged in their verbal chess match, Kevin, the only man at the table, had been a silent, faded presence. He was slumped in his corner, his rice bowl half empty, his chopsticks long since set down. His face was ashen, his eyes sunken, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the whirring fan. Ever since Jessica had come running down from the attic, babbling in terror about the loan shark papers she'd seen, Kevin's mind had been a dark, swirling cloud of dread. He was weak and cowardly, but not so stupid as to be unaware of the imminent danger. The debts from 2018, the tattooed thugs threatening to break his legs, it all came rushing back. If he got his hands on $600,000 in cash tomorrow, would the lenders just leave him alone? Or would they smell the money and strip him of every last cent? Moreover, looking at Evelyn's unnervingly calm demeanor, a vague but powerful sense of unease began to gnaw at him. For 10 years, whenever she had been this quiet, this still, it meant she was holding a winning hand. The meal dragged on in the suffocating atmosphere. Eleanor finished her soup, ready to dismissively tell Evelyn to go up and pack. But at that moment, crack. Kevin suddenly gripped the side of his chair, his knuckles turning white. He snapped his head up, his panicked eyes darting between his mother and sister, finally settling on the impassive face of his ex-wife. His Adam's apple bobbed as he struggled to breathe. Mom, Kevin's voice was a rough, hesitant croak, shattering the family's smug atmosphere. I've been thinking, Eleanor frowned, wiping her mouth with a napkin. Thinking about what? It's all settled. We get the money tomorrow. Don't be a weak-willed fool at a time like this. But Kevin couldn't stop. The formless fear had completely overshadowed his greed for the money. He swallowed hard and uttered a sentence that was like a bucket of ice water thrown over the entire table. Maybe we shouldn't sell the house yet. Let's cancel the appointment with Rick for tomorrow." The words hung in the dead air. The rhythmic whir of the ceiling fan suddenly seemed deafeningly loud. Eleanor's eyes bulged, bloodshot with fury. She slammed her napkin down on the table. Her chopsticks clattered to the cold tile floor. Her gaze was like a dagger, pinning her cowardly, trembling son. What did you just say?" The sound of Eleanor's shrill, enraged screaming, mixed with the crash of her fist on the table, echoed up from the dining room, tearing through the quiet of the night. After Kevin's hesitant, cowardly plea to cancel the sale, a full-blown tempest of fury had erupted at the dinner table. But Evelyn wasn't there to witness the pathetic spectacle. The moment her mother-in-law's chopsticks hit the floor, she had calmly set down her bowl, stood up, and walked slowly up the stairs, leaving behind the chaos of people being torn apart by their own greed and fear. Back in her bedroom, Evelyn turned the lock on the door. The dry click times of the deadbolt was a cold, metallic sound, but it brought with it a feeling of absolute security. She had sealed herself in a quiet oasis, completely insulated from the noisy, deceitful storm raging downstairs. The June night was hot and heavy, but when she walked to the window and pushed open the glass pane, a rare night breeze drifted in, cool and gentle. The dim moonlight filtered through the leaves of the maple tree outside, casting dappled, silver patterns on the faded hardwood floor. The room was nearly empty. Cardboard boxes filled with clothes, books, and a few personal items were stacked neatly in a corner. The faint scent of lavender from a sachet hanging in the closet seemed to be trying to ward off the musty, stale smell of a house that had not known a single day of peace in a decade. Evelyn pulled a small stool up to her vanity. The moonlight was so bright she didn't need a lamp. In the oval mirror, the reflection of a 3-8-year-old woman appeared, her eyes as deep and still as a frozen lake, without a single ripple. She slowly raised her hands to her head, her slender fingers touching the white pearl clip. Asterisk. Click. Asterisk. The metal clasp opened, and her thick, dark hair cascaded down over her shoulders. Evelyn placed the pearl clip on the glass surface. The round, lustrous pearls reflected the moonlight, emitting a cool, proud, and intensely pure light. The last memento from her late mother, the one thing that had been with her through it all, reminding her to maintain her grace and dignity in the muddy swamp of her husband's family. 10 years. Long enough for youth to fade, long enough to turn a girl full of faith and love into a woman with a heart of steel. Looking back, Evelyn thought she might cry, but her eyes were dry. There were no tears left for self-pity. Crying was for the helpless, and at this moment, her chest felt strangely light. The film of her past rewound in slow motion. 2014, she had walked through that rusty iron gate as a radiant new bride. 2016, she had gritted her teeth and drained her savings, borrowing from friends to buy this dilapidated house to build a solid foundation for what she thought would be a home. Then, in 2018, the nightmare. Kevin's business failed due to his gambling. Loan sharks threw filth at their door. And in the midst of a torrential downpour, she was 7 weeks pregnant with their first child. The pressure, the constant, merciless criticism from Eleanor, who was forcing her to use her own salary to pay off her husband's debts, had been too much. Evelyn had collapsed in the living room, a cold rush of blood signaling the end. Her unborn child was gone, taking with it the last of her innocence. And the most painful part, as she lay shivering in a cold, sterile hospital bed, Kevin was in hiding from the loan sharks, and Eleanor had only stopped by long enough to throw a single, cold sentence at her. Well, if you couldn't keep it, you couldn't keep it. Now focus on working to pay off this family's debts. From that rainy night on, Evelyn Reed had died. The woman sitting in front of the mirror now was a new version, reborn from the ashes of ultimate cruelty. Her 10 years of sacrifice and endurance had not been the acts of a weak woman. They had been the patient work of a hunter sharpening her weapon. She had collected every IOU, carefully hidden every waiver. She had calmly faced Jessica's taunts and her mother-in-law's glares. Now, there was no resentment, no impulsive anger. The stillness in her soul was the triumph of reason. Tomorrow's battle at the title company was not about petty revenge. It was about fair judgment. Karma doesn't just happen. Sometimes, it needs a human hand to deliver it. The $1.2 million from the backlot was not a lottery win. It was the compensation for her stolen youth, the fair, legal, and rightful price for the bloody wounds her family-in-law had inflicted upon her. Every single dollar was protected by the law and by the handwritten signature of the very man who had betrayed her. The night deepened, the ticking of the grandfather clock below a steady countdown to the collapse of an empire built on illusion. Suddenly, BZZZT, BZZZT, the silence was shattered. Her smartphone, lying next to the pearl clip, vibrated violently, its screen flashing a bright, insistent blue light that reflected in Evelyn's deep eyes. It was a text message from an unknown number, but the sender's tone was all too familiar. Evelyn picked up the phone and swiped to unlock it, her eyebrows raised slightly. On the screen, a short, cold message carried the weight of a ticking time bomb. Be there at 8 a.m. sharp tomorrow. I've locked in the buyer. Eleanor was afraid Kevin would back out, so she made the buyer wire a non-refundable cash deposit tonight. Congratulations on your coming victory, ma'am. Rick, the Fox. A half smile as sharp and cold as a razor blade slowly formed on Evelyn's lips. The moonlight outside seemed to shiver at the revelation. Greedy, hasty, and utterly foolish. Terrified by Kevin's hesitation at dinner, afraid the $1.2 million prize would slip through her fingers, Eleanor had frantically called the realtor and, in the dead of night, signed to receive a hard deposit. With a non-refundable deposit taken, if they backed out of the sale now, they would have to pay back double or even triple. She had, with her own hands, destroyed her son's last escape route. They had tied the noose, pulled it tight, and left themselves no room to turn back. The battlefield was set. The enemy was trapped. Evelyn turned off her phone and tossed it onto the bed. She picked up the pearl clip and fastened it back into her dark, silky hair. Her eyes looked out at the inky black sky. Go ahead and enjoy your last night of deluded dreams, you miserable family. Because when the sun rises tomorrow, it will burn all of your greed to ash. At exactly 8 a.m., the harsh June sun was already casting a brilliant, blinding glare on the asphalt of downtown Boston. The atmosphere inside the Sterling Title and Escrow office was a whirlwind of brisk, impersonal efficiency. The automated announcer called out ticket numbers in a flat, robotic voice, printer's word, spitting out fresh contracts still warm and smelling of toner. And above all, there was the sharp, definitive times, thump-thump times of notary seals stamping down on white paper the sound of power, of assets being cleanly divided, a place where all the messy emotions of family feuds were converted into cold, hard numbers before the eyes of the law. Outside the plate glass windows, a taxi screeched to a halt. The Miller family emerged in a loud, ostentatious procession. Despite the sweltering summer heat, Eleanor was wearing a garish, sequined silk pantsuit in a deep magenta, a thick, gold-plated chain necklace choking her wrinkled neck. She strode in with the arrogance of a queen about to receive tribute. At her side, Jessica strutted in a tight, fire-engine red dress, a fake designer handbag swinging from her arm as she obnoxiously chewed gum. They were dressed for a party, as if they were there to claim a lottery prize, not to finalize a divorce settlement. Only Kevin seemed out of place. He wore a dark, short-sleeved polo shirt and stumbled along behind his mother and sister. His eyes, dark and sunken, darted around nervously, his forehead beaded with sweat despite the powerful air conditioning. Rick the Fox's text about the non-refundable deposit had locked him into this path, and he moved like a robot, programmed and powerless. From across the lobby, Evelyn approached. In stark contrast to her in-law's garish display, she was the picture of understated elegance in a simple, gray linen suit. Her dark hair was neatly styled, held in place by the proud, white pearl clip. Her face was serene, her calm eyes sweeping over the three people who were laughing and talking loudly in the quiet, professional space. Well, look who's on time, Jessica called out, her voice shrill and mocking as Evelyn neared counter number 5. I was starting to think you'd be too scared to show up and part with the money. You bring all your paperwork? Don't try to pull a fast one by forgetting your driver's license or something to stall. We're finishing this today. Eleanor jutted out her chin, her hand resting on her purse. She glared at Evelyn. That's right, the buyer is waiting in the conference room. I took a $50,000 non-refundable cash deposit from them last night. If you try to back out now, and I have to pay them back double, I will personally strip you naked in the middle of this lobby. Don't think that just because you're divorced, you can do whatever you want. A foolish, direct confession from a woman. Standing on the edge of a cliff, they had accepted a deposit. A deposit accepted before both legal owners had signed the purchase agreement. Greed had blinded Eleanor, and she had personally locked her own son's escape route. Evelyn's lips curled into a faint, cold, superior smile. She calmly opened her handbag and removed a clear plastic document folder. Inside were her driver's license, the divorce decree, and the joint deed to the $1.2 million house. You and Jessica can relax, Evelyn replied, her voice soft as silk but each syllable sharp and clear. I promised I would be here, and I have brought every necessary document. What belongs to whom will be returned. Fair and square, with the law as our witness. I'm actually more eager to get this over with than you are. Just then, Rick the Fox emerged from VIP room 3, a black leather briefcase in hand. He gave Eleanor a subtle wink, then shot Evelyn a sly, conspiratorial grin. All right, everyone's here. Let's get this show on the road, he announced, feigning urgency. My client has the full amount wired and waiting in escrow. We just need you two to sign on the dotted line, get the stamp, and that first $600,000 payment will hit your account, Eleanor. Let's go, counter 5. The atmosphere immediately became tense and rushed. Eleanor snatched the documents from Kevin and hurried to the front of the line. Jessica stood on her tiptoes, practically vibrating with excitement. Only Evelyn moved with a calm, deliberate grace, like a theatergoer taking her seat for the final, dramatic act of a tragedy. Behind the glass partition at counter 5 sat a notary in his 40s, with a serious expression and a crisp, starched shirt. He took the thick pile of documents from Eleanor and began to review them. The noise of the lobby seemed to fade away. All Evelyn could hear was the soft times, rustle times of paper, and the steady times, tick-tock times of the wall clock. Kevin stood beside her, sweat pouring down his temples, his hands wringing constantly. Eleanor held her breath, her eyes glued to the notary's pen. The process went smoothly. The divorce decree was valid, the IDs matched, the deed was in order. But as the notary flipped to the second page of the deed, to the plat map showing the property layout, his movements suddenly stopped. He pushed his glasses up, his brow furrowing. His index finger tapped on the edge of the drawing, on the boundary line adjacent to the empty lot behind the house. The Miller family froze. The smile on Jessica's face hardened. Kevin stopped breathing. The notary looked up, his expression professional and sharp. He looked from Kevin to Evelyn's calm face. His voice was steady, but his question was a hammer blow to the silent room. Excuse me, Mr. and Mrs. Reed. According to the plat map on this joint deed, there appears to be a large, undeveloped parcel of land directly behind the property being sold. The purchase agreement I have here is only for the main house and its designated lot. What is the status of that rear parcel? Has the boundary been legally clarified? The notary's question had barely left his lips when the air at counter 5 seemed to vanish. The ambient noise of the lobby was suddenly muffled, a distant hum in the ears of those dreaming of riches. The white fluorescent light beat down on the glass counter, illuminating every floating dust mote and the shocking, panicked change of color on the faces of the Miller family. Before Evelyn or Kevin could even think to respond, Eleanor lunged forward. Her pudgy, ring-laden hand slammed down on the glass with a loud Times thwack asterisk. Her shrill, hurried voice, reeking of impatience and short-sighted calculation, filled the air. Oh, for God's sake, sir. Just look at the deed for the $1.2 million house, and do your job. That land out back? It's a garbage dump, a stinking swamp. It has nothing to do with this property. This $1.2 million deed is only for the house on the cul-de-sac. We're divorced. We're splitting it to be done with each other. Why are you bringing up that useless, stagnant pond and wasting everyone's time? Standing behind her mother, Jessica also chimed in, her red lipsticked mouth forming a pout of defiance. He's right, sir. The property lines are crystal clear. The back is just wasteland. We don't care about it, and we're certainly not going to fight with anyone over that worthless piece of junk. We've agreed on a price of $1.2 million with the buyer for this times house. Just print the contract so my brother can sign. If the buyer gets tired of waiting and backs out, are you going to pay us the penalty fee out of your own pocket? Listening to the mother and daughter duo, frantically disavowing the $1.2 million property, Evelyn had to lower her head to hide a deep, weary, and utterly contemptuous sigh. The foolish always die by their own quick mouths and short vision. They were so terrified that bringing up the back lot would delay the closing, that any complication would scare off their cash buyer. For the sake of the $1.2 million carrot dangling in front of their faces, they were personally slamming shut their last door to salvation, screaming before the law that they had no connection to, and no interest in, the land behind the house. The net was cast. The fish had willingly swum into it. Evelyn, her arms crossed, her face serene beneath the pearl clip, nodded. She confirmed their statements to the notary in a cool, clear voice. "They are correct, sir. The boundary is clear. That undeveloped lot is not part of the marital assets being divided today. Please proceed with printing the transfer agreement for the main house." The notary frowned slightly, glancing between the two parties, but his job was to execute a voluntary and legally sound agreement. He typed a few commands into his computer. The printer beside him whirred to life, spitting out 3 copies of the purchase and sale agreement, still warm and smelling of fresh ink. "If both parties are in agreement, and there are no further disputes, please review the terms carefully," the notary said, sliding the stack of papers under the glass. "If there are no questions, Mr. Miller and Ms. Reed, please sign and date each page, and then provide your thumbprints." The contract lay on the counter. Evelyn calmly took a fountain pen from her bag, her signature flowing, decisive, and without a moment's hesitation. She then pressed her index finger onto the red ink pad, leaving a perfect, round print, and pushed the document toward Kevin. It was his turn, but Kevin was frozen. The air was so thick, he could hear his own heart pounding like a drum against his ribs. The simple ballpoint pen on the counter suddenly seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. Sweat streamed down his face, soaking the collar of his shirt. His hand trembled as he reached for the pen, then snatched it back in terror. A terrible premonition, a deep, formless dread, was screaming in his mind. He looked up at his ex-wife. She was too calm. A woman about to be thrown out of her home, supposedly drowning in debt, should not be this serene, this proud. Was this a trap? "Sign it. Are you frozen, you fool?" Eleanor's shrill, piercing voice crashed down on Kevin's head, shattering his thoughts. She glared at her son, her teeth grinding. "The buyer has already wired the $50,000 deposit to my account. If you back out now, we have to pay back double. Are you going to cover that? The loan sharks are waiting to skin you alive. If you don't sell this house and get the money to pay them, are you just going to wait until they show up with knives?" Jessica added her own psychological jab, nudging him hard in the ribs. "Come on, Kevin, sign it so we can get the money. $600,000 in our account, and we can do whatever we want. What are you waiting for? You still feel sorry for her? You want to give her a chance to change her mind and take everything?" The relentless pressure from his family, the whispers from the crowd, the impatient glare from Rick the Fox, it all combined into an invisible noose, tightening around Kevin's throat. He was cornered, with no way out. His trembling hand finally grasped the pen. The tip scratched weakly against the paper. He squeezed his eyes shut, and with a surge of desperate, cornered animal energy, scribbled his name. The signature was a messy, hopeless scrawl, but it was clear, binding, and undeniable. Evelyn, standing beside him, let out a silent, imperceptible sigh of relief. A sharp, brilliant, and dangerous light flashed in her eyes. The lock was sealed. The notary quickly took the contracts, checking each signature, each red thumbprint. Everything was in order. The transfer of the $1.2 million house was voluntary, legal, and complete. He picked up the heavy brass seal. Asterisk thump. Asterisk. The seal came down hard on the paper, the sound echoing like a judge's gavel in a final sentencing. The bright red ink bloomed on the contract. The $1.2 million house was officially divided. Any right, any claim, any possible argument Kevin might have had to this marital asset was now permanently and irrevocably severed by the law. Eleanor clapped her hands, letting out a triumphant, cackling laugh. Jessica jumped up and down, already mentally spending her share. They hugged each other, convinced they had won, that they had taken back everything. They had no idea that the fateful thump times of the seal had just armed a $1.2 million bomb, a devastating truth that was about to detonate in the middle of the crowded title company lobby. The definitive thump times of the brass seal still seemed to vibrate in the cool, conditioned air. For Kevin, it was the sound of a massive weight being lifted. His ragged breathing steadied. The sweat on his brow began to dry, revealing a gray, exhausted face, but one tinged with a pathetic kind of relief. For Rick the Fox, it was the sweet cha-ching of a fat commission. But for Evelyn Reed, that dry, final sound was a death knell. It was the bell tolling for the Miller family's boundless greed, a final summons to the bottom of an abyss of their own making. The transaction was done. The law had spoken. The $2 million marital asset was severed, cutting forever the ties of benefit, blood, and legal obligation between her and the traitor she had once called her husband. As the notary began to separate the signed copies, Eleanor's smug triumph erupted into a full-throated, cackling laugh. It was a shrill, tasteless sound that echoed through the lobby, turning heads. She puffed out her chest, patting her purse, and shot a look of pure, condescending contempt at her former daughter-in-law. "Well, that's that," Eleanor announced loudly, putting on a show of magnanimity that only highlighted her cruelty. "Clean and fair. No one owes anyone a single cent. And Evelyn, since we were family once, let me, as an elder, give you one last piece of advice. In life, you reap what you sow. For 10 years, you lived in comfort in my son's house, but you failed to produce an heir for the Miller name. On top of that, you got yourself mixed up with loan sharks and gambling debts. For us to graciously give you a clean split of $600,000 today is a blessing you don't deserve. Take this money, go beg for mercy from your creditors, and find a cheap apartment somewhere to reflect on your life. Stop being so greedy and manipulative. Karma has a way of finding people like you." The vicious, reality-twisting words hung in the air. Jessica, preening at her mother's side, added her own poison. "That's right, Mom. Now that you have your $600,000, you can pack your bags and be out of our house by this afternoon. The new owners are bringing in a bulldozer. We don't have time to house a stranger. Oh, and that garbage heap out back that you bought with your secret money, you'd better hire a truck to haul that trash away yourself. We certainly aren't going to lift a finger to clean up your disgusting, bad luck mess." Every insult, every sneer, was a final act of psychological violence. The onlookers began to whisper, their faces a mixture of pity and curiosity. But in the face of their loud, vulgar victory dance, Evelyn remained perfectly still. She was as silent as a marble statue, the pearl clip in her hair gleaming, radiating a quiet, noble grace that completely eclipsed the Millers' cheap theatrics. She didn't offer a single word of rebuttal. Her lips were a firm line, her eyes deep, cold, and fixed on the notary's hands. Her absolute silence sent a shiver down Rick the Fox's spine. A cold dread crept up his neck. He was the only one in the room who sensed the powerful, dangerous undertow. This wasn't the silence of a defeated victim. It was the terrifying patience of a hunter, waiting for the prey to finish their jubilant dance on the edge of the pit she had dug for them. She needed that piece of paper. She needed the legally binding, red-stamped contract in her hand to establish the irreversible finality of the $1.2 million split. The moment that document left the notary's possession, her performance of patient endurance would be over. "The procedure is complete," the notary's calm voice announced, breaking the tension. He slid the 3 original copies of the contract forward. "Each party will retain one original. This transaction is now legally effective." Kevin snatched his copy like a drowning man grabbing a life raft. Eleanor crudely grabbed hers, stuffed it into her purse, and turned to her children. "It's done. Let's go, let's go. Kevin, call the buyer and tell them to wire the rest of the money." "Jessica, Tonight I'm taking you to the mall to buy you a gold necklace." They turned their backs, chins in the air, ready to stride away in a blaze of arrogant glory, convinced they had kicked out the freeloader and kept the fortune. But just as Eleanor's gaudy heel was about to lift off the polished floor, a clear, calm voice, carrying the weight of an avalanche, stopped them in their tracks. "Wait." All three Millers froze. Jessica nearly tripped. Kevin flinched and spun around. Evelyn calmly took her copy of the contract from the counter and folded it neatly. Then, her slender, elegant hands went to the zipper of her gray designer handbag. Asterisk, ZZZ Zip IP. Asterisk. The sound of the metal zipper opening was quiet, but in the silent lobby, it was as sharp, loud, and menacing as the sound of a sword being drawn from its sheath. The crowd held its breath. The notary looked up. Evelyn lifted her head high, her eyes no longer holding a trace of the submissive daughter-in-law. They were the eyes of a judge, about to swing the gavel and pronounce the most brutal of sentences. A slow, chilling smile spread across her lips. She reached deep into her bag. "The business of this time's house is concluded." Evelyn's voice was sharp, a steel blade slicing through the air, aimed directly at her former family. "Now, we move on to my time's business." The sharp rip of the zipper had barely faded when every eye in the lobby locked onto Evelyn's hands as she calmly retrieved something from her gray handbag. The air, already thick with tension, seemed to solidify. Eleanor, halfway to the exit, was frozen in place, her brow furrowed in a mixture of irritation and deep suspicion. Kevin just stared. His cowardly heart, which had just begun to slow, now hammered against his ribs. A cold dread told him this was far from over. From a hidden pocket, Evelyn smoothly extracted a large, rolled document, carefully protected in a waterproof sleeve, and a crisp, new-looking property deed. She stepped forward and, with a single, fluid motion, unrolled the large sheet of paper on the glass counter in front of the stunned notary. Asterisk whoosh, asterisk. The map unfurled, revealing a dense web of architectural lines, coordinates, and marked-off sections. In the bottom right corner, a bright, official red seal of the City of Brookline Planning and Development Commission was stamped with proud authority. "Sir, could you please review and confirm the legality of this document for me?" Evelyn's voice was no longer that of a victim. It was clear, resonant, and carried the power of a lightning bolt about to strike in a clear blue sky. The notary quickly adjusted his glasses and leaned in, his professional eye scanning the bold title before tracing the thick, red, dashed line that cut across the map. The moment his gaze fell upon the coordinates, bordering the very property they had just sold, the man's eyes widened in astonishment. He snapped his head up, looking at Evelyn with a mixture of shock and profound admiration. "This is the official 1:500 scale urban zoning map for the new Intercounty Commercial Corridor project," the notary announced, deliberately raising his voice so it carried across the lobby. "This map has been approved and officially sealed by the city. According to these coordinates, the new 8-meter access road cuts directly through and provides full frontage to the undeveloped parcel of land located behind house number 48 on your cul-de-sac. Intercounty Commercial Corridor. Full frontage. The technical, legal terms slammed into the Miller family like physical blows. Eleanor staggered back, her heels slipping on the polished floor. She had to grab onto Jessica to keep from collapsing. Her mouth hung open, but no sound came out. The stinking garbage heap, the swamp with bad feng shui, that she had so loudly and definitively disowned just 15 minutes earlier, had just transformed into prime real estate on a 6-lane boulevard. "No, that's impossible. That's absurd," Jessica shrieked, her voice cracking with disbelief. She lunged at the counter, her eyes bulging as if she wanted to tear the map to shreds. "How can that trash heap be on a major road? You're all in on this together. This is a scam. These are forged documents to steal our property." "Ma'am, I suggest you compose yourself and watch your language in a legal office," the notary said sternly, slapping his hand on the counter for order. "To make such an accusation is a serious offense. This seal is 100% authentic. In my 15 years as a notary, no one has ever had the audacity to bring a forged city planning document into my office." He then frowned and turned back to Evelyn. Miss Reed, the zoning map is legitimate. However, to prove legal ownership of this now valuable property, you must provide the official deed for this specific parcel. This was the moment. Evelyn calmly slid the new, crisp deed across the counter. The smile on her face was radiant, proud, and free, like a rare flower blooming in the dead of night. The sense of vindication was a physical rush. "Here is the deed, sir," Evelyn announced, her voice like a bell, clear and ringing. "Would you be so kind as to read aloud the owner's name, the source of the asset's acquisition, and the property's legal description, so that those who are no longer involved can hear it clearly?" The notary opened the deed. He cleared his throat and began to read, his voice loud and clear enough to shatter the eardrums of the greedy, trembling family. Certificate of title, Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Grantee, Ms. Evelyn Reed. Asterisk. Asterisk. He paused for emphasis. There are no co-grantees or joint tenants listed. Source of title, property acquired via transfer of deed, purchased with funds from a legally separate and private inheritance from the grantee's deceased parents. He looked up, his sharp gaze cutting straight to Kevin, whose face was now the color of wet cement. "Mr. Miller, Mrs. Miller, this deed was recorded and established as a property entirely separate and independent from the residential lot in front of it. It is classified as separate property, acquired with Miss Reed's personal, inherited funds. Furthermore, just moments ago, you both voluntarily signed a legally binding contract and stated before me, a legal witness, that your family has no claim, no interest, and no dispute whatsoever concerning the land behind the main house. The division of your marital assets is officially concluded. This land is, completely and absolutely, the sole and separate legal property of Miss Evelyn Reed." The cold, hard, and merciless truth of the law pulverized every last one of the Miller family's greedy delusions. The atmosphere in the lobby reached a breaking point. The fake triumph of moments before was crushed into a million pieces of shame, regret, and a gut-wrenching, soul-searing pain. At that moment, Rick the Fox, who had been silently watching the drama unfold, stepped forward. He began to clap, a slow, deliberate applause. The sly, foxy grin on his face was one of pure admiration for the brilliant, deep, and ruthless strategy of the woman with the pearl clip. "Bravo. Absolutely brilliant. A masterclass in turning the tables," Rick said, clicking his tongue as he looked at Eleanor's collapsing, distorted face. He lowered his voice, delivering the final, devastating economic blow. "Eleanor, my friend, let me be honest with you, and this is going to hurt. That garbage heap you were so quick to dismiss? With 25 feet of direct commercial frontage on a new boulevard, a square, buildable lot of that size, the absolute rock-bottom market price right now is about $1,200 per square foot. A quick calculation. Rick deliberately dragged out the moment, letting the number sink in like a poison dart. The current value of that undeveloped lot is no less than $1.2 million. $1.2 million. The number exploded like a nuclear bomb in the title company lobby. $1.2 million. Double the value of the entire house they had just fought tooth and nail for, trampling over decency and morality just to get their hands on a measly $600,000. Eleanor's knees buckled. Her body trembled as if she'd been struck by a mortal illness. Her once sharp, predatory eyes were now vacant, staring blankly at the deed bearing Evelyn's name. Jessica's jaw dropped, her hands flying to her head as tears of pure, agonizing disbelief streamed down her face. And Kevin, the spineless husband, seemed to have had the very life force sucked out of him. He stumbled back, his knees giving way completely, and he collapsed onto the cold, unforgiving tile floor. 15 minutes ago, they had smugly signed away the house for $1.2 million, convinced they had won, that they had cast out the penniless wife to deal with her debts. 15 minutes later, that very same contract had become an ironclad legal wall, forever blocking them from the massive $1.2 million fortune. The net had been drawn tight, and the greedy had, in the end, buried themselves in the dark, lonely grave they had so eagerly dug. The lobby of the title company was now a vacuum, a space sucked dry of air, filled only with a thick, suffocating silence. The figure of $1, 2 million, uttered by the realtor, hung in the air before crashing down on the Miller family like a bolt of divine retribution, shattering their greedy fantasies. Eleanor, her face a ghastly shade of white, her makeup streaked with sweat, staggered. Her gold-ringed hands trembled, clawing at the glass countertop as if trying to hold on to the last, crumbling fragments of her hope. She gasped for air, her eyes bloodshot and wild. This brutal truth was too much for a woman who had spent a lifetime penny-pinching and scheming to extract every last dollar from her daughter-in-law. Fraud. This is a blatant, fraudulent scheme. Eleanor suddenly shrieked, her voice a piercing, hysterical sound that desecrated the solemnity of the legal office. She lunged forward, her chubby arm reaching to snatch the $1.2 million deed from the counter, but the notary swiftly pulled it back. Sir, you must void that contract for the house sale immediately. Eleanor screamed, spittle flying from her lips. She trapped us. That land, that commercial property, was acquired while she was a Miller, living in our house. It can't be separate property. Void the contract. Give us back the papers. We're not selling anything. We have to divide everything again, including that $1.2 million gold mine. The notary frowned, slamming his hand on the counter with a loud crack. Mrs. Miller, I must ask you to maintain order. The purchase and sale agreement was signed voluntarily by both parties, with thumbprints and the official seal of the state. The ink is dry. Legally, the transaction is complete and irreversible. To void this contract would require the written, mutual consent of both parties. Unless Miss Reed here agrees, you can scream until you are blue in the face, and it will be utterly worthless. Like a drowning man grasping at a piece of driftwood, Kevin scrambled up from the floor. He threw himself at the counter, his eyes wild and pathetic, fixed on Evelyn. Evelyn, you can't be this cruel. That land was purchased in 2016. We were still legally married. I contributed to it. I have a right to a share. Don't you dare try to take that whole $1.2 million for yourself. If you don't share it, I will sue you. I'll file an injunction and tie up that property in court for years. I'll make sure you get nothing. A weak, pathetic threat from a broken traitor. The onlookers whispered, curious to see how the woman with the pearl clip would handle this last-ditch legal gambit. But Evelyn just smiled, a cold, sharp smile like a newly honed blade. She calmly reached back into the hidden pocket of her handbag and withdrew a stack of old, yellowed papers. Slowly, deliberately, she spread them out on the counter, right in front of Kevin and Eleanor. You want to sue me, Kevin? Evelyn's voice was crystal clear, but each word was a lead weight. Take a good look at this. Lying under the harsh fluorescent lights was a handwritten document, its blue ink faded but still perfectly legible. At the top, in neat block letters, asterisk asterisk waiver of interest in separate property. Asterisk asterisk. And beneath it, a thick stack of high-interest loan agreements and pawnshop receipts, all bearing Kevin's desperate, red ink thumbprints from 6 years ago. Kevin's eyes bulged. A strangled, choking sound caught in his throat. Evelyn turned to the notary, her composure absolute. Sir, would you please read the contents of this original, handwritten waiver, signed and thumbprinted by Mr. Kevin Miller on Mayonbesh, Ikibinonsikis. The notary picked up the paper and, in a loud, clear voice, read, I, Kevin Miller, do hereby voluntarily and with full understanding, acknowledge and agree that the undeveloped parcel of land, located at the rear of the property, is the sole and separate property of my wife, Evelyn Reed, having been purchased with funds from her personal inheritance. I confirm that I have made no financial contribution to its acquisition and hold no rights, interests, or claims to said property. I hereby permanently and irrevocably waive any and all rights to contest ownership of this asset in any form. The reading ended, and the entire lobby fell into a deathly silence. The ironclad proof was laid bare. Evelyn tapped a slender finger on the stack of loan shark papers. Her voice dripped with scorn. That year, in exchange for me mortgaging my future, to pay off your massive gambling debts and save you from the loan shark's knives. You signed this piece of paper. Your own mother stood right there and witnessed it, sneering that the garbage heap wasn't even worth the paper it was written on. For 10 years, you've trampled on me, bled me dry, treated me like your personal debt slave. And now, the moment the garbage you threw away turns into $1.2 million, you want to come back and cry foul. The law requires evidence. This piece of paper is the death sentence for your family's bottomless greed. Every word was a scalpel, dissecting and exposing the cowardly, foolish, and cruel nature of her husband's family. Hearing this, Eleanor's legs gave out, and she collapsed into a plastic chair behind her. She clutched her chest, gasping for air, her eyes rolling back in their sockets, her face contorting in a silent, agonized scream. The pride of the cruel matriarch had been shattered into dust. "Oh, my God!" Jessica suddenly shrieked. She grabbed her head, her elaborate hairstyle coming undone. Her sly eyes were now bloodshot and wild, fixed on her trembling brother. The agonizing pain of losing the $1.2 million had blinded her to everything else. Family ties, love, loyalty, all of it was worthless now. When she couldn't attack Evelyn, the cornered animal turned on her own. "You useless, pathetic, stupid fool," Jessica screamed, pointing a finger at Kevin, her voice echoing through the lobby. 6 years ago, you gambled away our future. You handed a $1.2 million gold mine to that woman, and you kept it a secret from us. You've ruined us. You are a disgrace. You signed away a fortune to save your own worthless skin, and you dragged us all down with you. Give me back my money. Give me back my $1.2 million. In a fit of rage, Jessica lunged at Kevin, her manicured nails scratching at his face, her fists pounding on his back. Eleanor, also driven mad by the loss, crawled on the floor, beating her hands against the tiles and wailing, cursing her son, her fate, her very existence. The pathetic spectacle of a family tearing itself apart played out under the bright, unforgiving lights of the title company. The same people who, just moments before, had been so smugly preaching about karma, were now reduced to feral animals fighting over scraps in a pit of their own making. A disgusting, tragic, and utterly deserved comedy. Security guards rushed over, struggling to pull the hysterical Jessica off Kevin. The lobby was filled with their screams, curses, and sobs, a chaotic, shameful stain on the dignified space. But in the midst of this wretched chaos, Evelyn Reed had created her own world, a world of freedom, pride, and pristine clarity. She calmly gathered her documents, the yellowed IOUs, the folded $1, $2 million zoning map, the precious deed, and placed them back in the hidden pocket of her gray handbag. *ZZZIP. The zipper closed with a sharp, final sound, officially ending 10 years of suffocating misery, 10 years of enduring the life of an unpaid servant to a heartless family. She didn't spare them a single glance. The most brutal punishment for a traitor is not a screaming match, but absolute indifference, treating them as if they were nothing more than invisible dust. Evelyn turned and walked towards the exit, her steps even and graceful. The automatic glass doors slid open, and a wave of hot June air, thick with the bright, harsh sunlight of a Boston summer, hit her face. But strangely, it didn't feel suffocating. She closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep, long breath. The air outside was brilliant, expansive, and tasted of freedom. The white pearl clip in her hair caught the sunlight and flashed, a glittering, proud crown on the head of a woman who had just won the most important battle of her life. Just as the heel of her shoe touched the granite steps outside, a choked, desperate voice cried out from behind her. "Evelyn! Evelyn, wait! Please! Wait for me!" It was Kevin. Ignoring the security guards, ignoring the scornful stares of the crowd, he staggered out into the sun-drenched courtyard. His shirt was torn, 2 buttons missing from where Jessica had clawed at him, his face a mess of sweat and tears. He stumbled towards her, his legs shaking so badly he could barely stand. Thud. He collapsed to his knees on the hot pavement. His large, pathetic hands reached out and grabbed the hem of her gray linen suit, a desperate, drowning man's grip. "I'm sorry," Kevin sobbed, his face a wreck of snot and tears. "I was wrong. I know I was wrong." For 10 years, I was a terrible husband, a coward. I let my mother and sister hurt you, but in my heart, I've always loved you. Don't leave me. Don't leave me alone with this mess. We can undo the divorce. We can get back together. We had 10 years together, Evelyn. Please, give me one more chance. Let me make it up to you. Let me take care of you for the rest of our lives. The words coming from that cowardly mouth were so false they were nauseating. Make it up to you. Take care of you. Evelyn knew that the only thing he wanted to take care of was the $1.2 million fortune he had just signed away. When she was penniless and in debt, he had called her trash. Now that she held a fortune, he was dredging up love and 10 years together as a smokescreen for his boundless greed. A coward, to the very end, is only ever a coward. Evelyn looked down at him, her gaze as still and cold as a frozen lake. She didn't raise her voice. She simply, and with great finality, yanked the fabric of her suit from his sweaty, grasping hands. Asterisk rip. Asterisk. The sound was small, but definitive. Kevin lost his balance and fell forward, his hands clutching at empty air. Kevin, Evelyn's voice was low, but each syllable was a shard of ice. Don't you dare use the words love or history to tarnish my sacrifice ever again. 10 years ago, I used everything I had to save you from loan sharks. You left me alone in the emergency room when I lost our child. 5 days ago, when you thought I was broke, you sneered at my property and helped your mother try to throw me out on the street. Whatever love, we had died a long time ago, killed by your family's greed and your own ingratitude. She leaned down slightly, a mocking, powerful smile on her lips. The price of greed is to lose everything. The price of ingratitude is to be left with nothing. The water has been spilled, and you can never get it back. You have your $600,000 from the house sale. Go and pay off your blood debts. And don't you ever dream of my $1.2 million again. From the moment that seal came down, Evelyn Reed and Kevin Miller are strangers. With that, Evelyn stood up straight, her presence as regal as a queen who had just sentenced a traitor. She raised her hand and hailed a taxi that was pulling up to the curb. The driver quickly opened the back door. Without a moment's hesitation, without a single backward glance, Evelyn got into the car, settling into the cool leather seat. Her pearl clip glittered, a final statement of her own indestructible worth. Slam. Asterisk. The car door shut, a loud, cold, final sound. It was the sound of a door slamming on the past, a door sealing the greedy in the pit of despair they had dug for themselves. The taxi pulled away, merging into the bustling city traffic, leaving behind a pathetic, kneeling figure on the hot pavement. Inside the glass doors, Eleanor and Jessica were still screaming, tearing at each other in a frenzy of loss and regret. They had lost everything. In a single, sunlit morning of perfect karmic justice. The taxi pulled up to the curb in front of the shady, tree-lined storefront of the Gilded Spoon Patisserie. Evelyn stepped out. The noisy, suffocating, and morally bankrupt world of the title company was now far behind her. Before her was only her kingdom of peace. The brass bell above the door chimed, a series of clear, bright notes welcoming its true owner home. Evelyn walked inside, and a wave of cool air, rich with the scent of French butter, warm vanilla, and sweet, baking bread, washed over her. She closed her eyes and took a deep, long breath, filling her lungs, feeling the clean air cleanse every cell of the dust, the pain, and the bloody wounds of the last 10 years. She set her gray handbag on the counter and calmly unfastened the white pearl clip from her hair. Her long, dark hair cascaded down her back. The bright June sun streamed through the window, striking the lustrous pearls and making them sparkle with a proud, brilliant light. That same light illuminated the serene, beautiful face of the 38-year-old woman. For the first time in a decade, after shedding the heavy armor of being a Miller daughter-in-law, Evelyn felt impossibly light, as if a great weight had been lifted from her soul. She owed no one, she had to please no one, and she would never again allow anyone to trample on her dignity. Just as she was tying a clean, cream-colored apron around her waist, her phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with the name **Arthur Vance, attorney. **Evelyn smiled and answered the call. "Hello, Evelyn. I wanted to congratulate you on an absolutely stunning, legally flawless victory. The veteran lawyer's voice boomed from the other end, full of satisfaction and a hint of glee. I just received a report from Rick the Fox and the local police precinct covering your old neighborhood. It was, and I quote, a finale for the ages. What happened, Mr. Vance? Evelyn asked calmly as she began to line up fresh, organic eggs on the stainless steel counter. They started tearing each other apart the moment they left my sight. Mr. Vance chuckled. Rick forced them to hand over the house keys immediately for the new owner's demolition crew. But somehow, the news of Kevin's $600,000 cash out got out. Those old loan sharks from 6 years ago smelled the money. They showed up with 2 pickup trucks full of tattooed thugs and blocked off the entire cul-de-sac. Evelyn's hand, holding a whisk, paused for a fraction of a second. Karma, it seemed, was swifter than even she had imagined. The thugs forced Kevin to wire them the money principal plus a decade of exorbitant interest on the spot. Or they were going to break his legs, Mr. Vance continued, his voice grim. Eleanor was on her knees in the middle of the street, wailing and begging, but it was no use. Jessica, terrified of being implicated, grabbed a few of her fake designer bags, cursed out her brother, and fled in a taxi, abandoning her mother and brother to their fate. In the end, Kevin had to transfer more than 2/3 of his share to pay off his blood debt. The new owners then forced Eleanor and Kevin out of the house. They left with a few garbage bags of old clothes in the middle of the scorching afternoon sun. As she was leaving, Eleanor was beating her chest and screaming curses at her disgraceful son for handing a $1.2 million fortune to his ex-wife. They are, for all intents and purposes, destitute and utterly disgraced. It's over, Evelyn. Listening to this brutal report, Evelyn felt no joy, no pity. The frozen lake of her heart remained perfectly still. Thank you for the update, Mr. Vance, she said softly, her voice cool and final, severing the last thread of connection. From this day forward, the lives, the fortunes, and the failures of those 3 people have absolutely nothing to do with me. She ended the call and set the phone aside. She began to knead a new batch of dough, her hands strong and patient, pressing into the soft, white mass with a steady, rhythmic motion. The sound of the dough on the marble countertop, mixed with the quiet ticking of the clock, was a soothing, healing melody. The smell of butter browning in the oven was rich and enveloping, filling every empty space in her soul. The June sun was still shining brightly through the window, warming the proud, free woman standing in its light. Freedom, she realized, had a scent, and it smelled sweet, warm, and absolutely delicious.